Tonight, we're diving into the strange and wonderful truth of the spice, the substance at the very heart of the world of Dune, and the reason so many call it a drug when it is really something far stranger. Imagine a single desert planet, lost in the vastness of an ancient empire, that produces a substance found nowhere else in all the known worlds, a substance that lengthens life, opens the mind, folds the distances between stars, and quietly holds the fate of an entire civilization in its glittering dust. Settle in now, let your shoulders soften, and let the room around you grow dim and warm. There is nothing here to solve and nothing here to fear, only a slow, steady telling meant to carry you toward rest. Over the next 20 chapters, we will explore, without haste, what the spice melange truly is, where it comes from, what it does to those who take it, and why whoever controls it controls the universe itself. You do not need to remember any of it, and you do not need to hold on. Let the story move through you like a slow tide across the dunes, and let it carry you, softly, down toward sleep, somewhere far beyond the reach of any night sky you have ever seen. In a time so distant that Earth itself has softened into legend, there is a single substance that quietly holds an entire universe together. It carries many names across the 10,000 worlds of the Imperium, yet most often it is called simply the spice, or by its older and truer name, the melange. To speak of it is to speak of nearly everything, for there is little in that vast and ancient civilization that the spice does not touch in some hidden way. Picture, for a moment, the sheer size of the setting into which we are drifting tonight. Humankind has spread across the darkness for many thousands of years until people live beneath countless suns, on worlds of ice and ocean and endless forest, on planets ruled by noble houses whose bloodlines stretch back further than memory. Great ships cross the emptiness between the stars. A sprawling empire binds these scattered worlds together under one distant throne. And through all of it, like a single golden thread woven through an immense and complicated tapestry, runs the spice. It is easy, at first, to mistake the melange for something small. To the eye, it is only a fine powder, reddish-brown, glittering faintly like cinnamon dust caught in slow light. It smells, people say, of warm earth and sweet spice, a scent that seems familiar the way a half-remembered dream feels familiar, though no one can ever quite name it. A person might sprinkle it into food or drink, might breathe it in the air of certain places, and think it no more than a rare and pleasant seasoning. But the melange is not small at all. It is, without exaggeration, the most valuable substance in the known universe, and the whole of that universe turns quietly upon it. Consider what makes a thing truly precious. On the old worlds, people once prized gold, or gems, or rare metals pulled from deep mines. Yet those treasures, however lovely, were in the end only treasures. They could be admired and hoarded and traded, but the daily turning of the world did not depend upon them. The spice is different. The spice is not merely wanted. The spice is needed so deeply and by so many powers at once that without it the entire fabric of civilization would unravel and fall still. For the melange does many things, and each of them alone would be enough to make it beyond price. It lengthens human life, holding age gently at bay so that those who take it may live far past their natural span. It sharpens health and vitality, warming the body from within. It quickens the mind and heightens awareness, opening doors of perception that most people never even know are there. And in those who take it most deeply, it stirs something stranger still, a faint and flickering ability to sense what has not yet happened, to feel the shape of time before it arrives. All of this from a single reddish powder gathered from the sands of one lonely world. That is perhaps the first great mystery of the spice, and the one worth resting upon tonight. Of all the countless planets that humankind has settled, of all the suns and soils and seas, the melange is found in only one place. It cannot be manufactured in any laboratory. It cannot be grown in gardens or brewed in vats. Every grain of it that has ever passed between human fingers comes from a single desert world at the edge of the empire, a harsh planet of endless sand called Arrakis, known to those who love and fear it simply as Dune. Nowhere else, not on the richest world, not in the deepest mine, not by the cleverest art of any maker, only there. And so a curious thing happens. Because the spice can come from only one world, that one world becomes the quiet center of everything, no matter how distant or how barren it may seem. Every great house, every merchant, every priest and pilot and ruler across 10,000 planets is bound, whether they think of it or not, to that single ocean of sand. The powerful send their fortunes there. The ambitious send their soldiers. And the mystery of the spice draws them all, like moths circling a lamp they do not fully understand. It is worth pausing here to feel how strange this truly is. We are used to imagining that power lies in great cities, in shining capitals, in the seats of kings. Yet in this universe, the deepest power hides in a wasteland, in a place most people would call worthless if they did not know its secret. The empire is enormous and glittering, and yet it leans its whole weight upon a desert. There is something almost dreamlike in that, the way the vast rests upon the small, the way an entire civilization balances upon grains of sand. The spice is also wrapped in a kind of silence. Those who use it most and understand it best rarely speak plainly of what it is or how it works. The great organizations of the Imperium, the ones whose strength depends most completely upon the melange, guard their knowledge as carefully as they guard their treasure. Some ride the spice to fold the distances between stars. Some drink deeply of it to unlock the memory of 1,000 ancestors. Some are so saturated by it over long lifetimes that their very eyes and bodies are changed by its touch. Yet each keeps its own understanding hidden, and so the spice remains, even to those who live upon it, a thing half known and half mysterious. For all its gifts, the melange also asks a price, and that price runs quietly beneath every gift it gives. To take the spice deeply is to be bound to it forever. Once the body has learned to lean upon it over many years, it can no longer easily let go. The very gift of long life becomes a chain, for to stop taking the spice, after enough of it, is to sicken and die. And so the melange offers with one hand a doorway to wonders, and with the other hand fastens a gentle, unbreakable tie. It is treasure and trap woven together, and part of what makes it so endlessly fascinating is that no one has ever managed to fully untangle the two. All of this, the long life and the heightened mind, the folding of space and the whisper of the future, the single desert source and the hidden price, gathers into one simple and astonishing truth. The spice is not an ordinary drug, though it is often called one. It is something far larger and far stranger. A substance that shapes the health of bodies, the reach of ships, the fate of houses, and the very course of history. It is, in the fullest sense, the substance that runs the universe. Tonight we will follow that thread slowly and gently, letting each turn of the story carry us a little deeper toward rest. We will learn where the spice comes from and what strange creatures give it life. We will learn what it does to those who take it, why their eyes turn blue, and how it lets human beings cross the great dark between the stars. We will learn of the ones who live longest by its grace and the ones who are changed most by its touch. And through all of it, we will hold quietly to that first patient question, the question beneath the whole saga. What, truly, is the spice? For now, it is enough to rest in the wonder of it, to let the mind soften around the image of a fine reddish powder glittering in warm light, a small and quiet thing upon which an entire universe silently turns. There is no need to hold tightly to any of it, no need to remember or to reach. The story will carry itself and carry you with it, gently down towards sleep. Up next in Chapter 2, where the spice comes from, we'll travel to the single desert world that holds the fate of all the others, and walk out onto the burning sands of Arrakis. Far out toward the ragged edge of the Imperium, where the mapped worlds grow sparse and the great trade routes thin to single threads, there turns a planet unlike any other in the settled universe. It carries an official name, Arrakis, spoken in the cool halls of distant courts, and it carries a truer name, whispered with both love and dread by those who actually walk upon it. They call it Dune. It is a world of sand, almost nothing but sand, and yet it is the most important planet that has ever been. To understand the spice, one must first understand where it lives, and to understand that, one must let the imagination cross an enormous emptiness and come to rest upon a small, dry, golden sphere hanging alone in the dark. Seen from far above, Arrakis is beautiful, the way a flame is beautiful. There are no blue oceans, no green forests, no soft belts of cloud drifting across cool seas. There is only the endless tan and amber of desert, broken here and there by dark ridges of bare rock, wrapped in thin veils of dust that the winds lift high into the sky. It is a world with almost no open water anywhere upon it, a place where the very idea of rain has faded into something close to legend. Down on the surface, the heat is a living thing. By day, the sun stands white and merciless above the dunes, and the sand throws its light back until the whole world shimmers. The air is so dry that a body loses its moisture with every breath, and moisture on Arrakis is more precious than any coin. The people who have learned to live there guard every drop of water as though it were their own blood, for in a sense it is. To survive the open desert, they wear close-fitting suits that capture the body's own moisture and return it again and again so that nothing is wasted. Water is life on Dune in the most literal way, and a world so poor in water might seem the very last place to hold a treasure that rules the stars. And yet, it does. For beneath and among these burning sands lies the spice, the melange, found here and here alone in all the known universe. It gathers in the deep desert, far from the scattered cities that cling to the planet's rocky north, out where few dare to go and fewer still return. There, in the great open sea of dunes, the spice rises to the surface in rich reddish deposits, staining the sand with its warm color, filling the dry air with its strange sweet scent. To find it is to find fortune. To gather it is to risk everything. The harvesting of the spice is one of the most dangerous kinds of work that human beings have ever undertaken. Great machines are brought out into the deep desert, huge crawling harvesters that creep across the dunes on wide treads, scooping up the spice-laden sand and sifting the precious melange from the ordinary grains. Around them hover lighter craft, watchful and quick, ready to lift the harvester away at a moment's notice. For the deep desert does not give up its treasure freely. It is guarded, as we shall see, by the most fearsome creatures in the universe. And the very act of taking the spice calls those guardians up out of the sand. So the work goes on in a kind of tense and careful rhythm. The harvesters crawl and gather, while the sky watchers keep their eyes upon the horizon, waiting for the first faint sign of danger rising far off across the dunes. When that sign comes, everything must move with terrible speed, for the desert of Arrakis forgives no delay. Fortunes are pulled from the sand in these narrow windows of time, and lives are lost in them too. Every grain of melange that reaches the far worlds of the Empire has passed first through this danger, carried out of the deep desert by people who wagered their lives against the sand. Why, one might ask, would anyone endure such peril for a mere powder? The answer lies in that single, extraordinary fact we have already touched upon. Arrakis is the only source. Not the best source, not the cheapest source, but the only source in the whole of the known universe. If the spice could be found on 1,000 gentle worlds, no one would trouble themselves with this cruel desert. But it cannot. Every ruler who wishes to extend his life, every pilot who must cross the great dark, every order that seeks the deeper powers of the mind, all of them depend in the end upon what comes out of these sands. And so this one harsh planet, worthless by any ordinary measure, holds the fate of all the others in its dry and burning hands. There is a quiet irony worth resting upon here. Arrakis gives so much, and yet is itself so poor. It offers the universe long life, and yet its own people live hard, sharp-edged lives, always one mistake away from death by thirst or by the creatures of the deep. It pours out riches beyond counting, and yet upon its surface the greatest wealth of all is a hidden pocket of water, a damp cavern, a sheltered place where a little moisture might be kept. The planet that makes emperors is a place where a spilled cup could cost a life. The people native to this world, the Fremen, understand Dune in a way that no outsider ever truly can. They have lived among its sands for many generations, learning its moods, its dangers, its secret mercies. They know where the spice gathers and how the desert breathes. They know how to move across the open dunes without waking what sleeps beneath. To the great powers of the Empire, Arrakis is a prize to be seized and squeezed. To the Fremen, it is home, harsh and beloved, a mother of sand who asks much and gives much in return. We shall come to know them better as our story unfolds, for their quiet wisdom holds one of the deepest keys to the mystery of the spice. For now, let the mind simply rest upon the strangeness of this single world. Imagine standing at the edge of the deep desert as the day cools toward evening. The sand stretches away in long, slow ridges, softening from white gold to deep amber as the light lowers. The wind carries that faint cinnamon sweetness, the breath of the spice itself, drifting up from somewhere far out among the dunes. Everything is quiet and vast and old, and beneath your feet, beneath the shifting sand, lies the source of a substance that steers 10,000 worlds. It is a place of paradox, this Dune, a wasteland that rules the stars, a desert of thirst that pours out endless riches, a lonely planet at the Empire's edge that sits, in truth, at its very center. The great houses of the Imperium have fought over it, bled over it, schemed and murdered for the right to hold its sands, all for the sake of the reddish powder that gathers there and nowhere else. Whoever holds Arrakis holds the spice, and whoever holds the spice holds a quiet power over every other world. That is why this dry and distant planet, poor in everything but sand and danger, has drawn the eyes of emperors for so long. And the spice that gathers in its sands did not simply appear there by chance, scattered like ordinary minerals in ordinary rock. It has a source deeper than the desert itself, bound up with living things so great and so strange that they have become the stuff of legend across the settled universe. The sands of Arrakis are not empty. Something moves beneath them, vast and ancient and patient, And it is from these creatures and the slow cycle of their lives that the melange truly comes. Up next in Chapter 3, the sandworms and the cycle of spice will descend beneath the dunes to meet the vast creatures that guard the desert and, over uncounted ages, give the spice its very life. Beneath the sands of Arrakis, something enormous is moving. It does not hurry. It has no need to hurry, for it has ruled the deep desert since long before human beings ever set foot upon this world. It is the sandworm, spoken of by the Fremen with a mixture of terror and reverence, and it is the true heart of the mystery of the spice. To understand where the melange comes from, one must come at last to these great creatures, for the worms and the desert together, over ages beyond counting, are the source of the spice itself. The sandworms of Dune are almost beyond imagining in their size. The greatest of them stretch for hundreds of meters, longer than the largest ships, moving through the sand as easily as a fish moves through water. Their bodies are ringed and armored, their mouths vast circular pits lined with rows of crystalline teeth, and when one rises from the dunes, it comes like a living hill. Sand pouring off its flanks, the ground trembling for a great distance around. They are drawn by rhythm, by any steady beat upon the sand, and so the harvesters that gather the spice must always fear them, for the very vibration of their work calls the worms up out of the deep. To the outside powers of the Empire, the sandworms are simply a hazard, a monstrous obstacle standing between them and their treasure. But to the Fremen, and to those who look closer, the worms are something far greater. They are called, in the old reverent speech, the Makers, and this name holds a deep truth. For the spice does not come from the sand by accident. It is bound, through a long and hidden cycle, to the life of these great creatures. And without them, there would be no melange at all. The cycle begins in a form so small that one might never guess its kinship to the giant worm. Deep in the sand live tiny creatures the Fremen call the Little Makers, the sand trout. They are not worms at all, not yet, but small, leathery living things that move through the sand and do one strange and vital work. They seek out water. On a world so dry, any pocket of moisture is rare and precious, and the sand trout gather around it, sealing it away, drawing it deep beneath the surface and holding it apart from the living desert above. In this way, the Little Makers keep Arrakis dry, for they lock away the water that might otherwise soften the sands and change the world entirely. It is here, in the meeting of water and sand and the Little Makers, that the first stirrings of the spice begin. When water is sealed away deep below, and the pressures and the long, slow chemistry of the desert work upon it, a great transformation takes place. Out of this hidden process rises a swelling mass that grows and builds and finally bursts up toward the surface. And in that bursting, the raw beginnings of the spice are flung out into the sand. The desert itself, guided by these creatures, becomes a vast and patient factory, brewing the melange across spans of time longer than any human memory. The Little Makers do not stay little forever. Over the long years, through stages that the Fremen have watched and understood across many generations, the sand trout change. They grow and join and harden, passing through the shapes of their strange life, until at last from that small, leathery beginning rises the giant sandworm itself. The tiny water hunter becomes the great maker of the deep desert, the armored titan that rules the dunes. And so the smallest and the largest creatures of Arrakis are revealed to be one being at different turns of its life, bound together in a single unbroken circle. Once grown, the sandworm becomes both the guardian of the spice and, in its own way, its keeper. It patrols the deep desert where the melange gathers, and its presence makes the harvesting of the spice a matter of life and death. But it does more than guard. The worm is deeply, wholly tied to the spice, so bound to it that the two can scarcely be spoken of apart. The melange is in the worm's making and in its slow living, in the sands it moves through and the deposits its life leaves behind. Where the worms are, the spice is. Where the worms are not, the desert is barren of its treasure. They are the living engine of the whole slow cycle. And it is a slow cycle, one that turns not in days or years, but across ages. The little makers seal their pockets of water. The buried moisture and the desert chemistry brew the beginnings of the spice. The swelling pre-spice mass builds and bursts and scatters the melange across the sand. The sand trout grow and change and rise at last as the great worms, who guard the deep desert where the whole process begins again. Round and round it turns, patient and enormous, a rhythm older than any throne, and out of it comes the single most precious substance in the universe. There is a fragile beauty in this that is easy to overlook amid all the talk of fortunes and empires. The spice that rulers kill for, that pilots depend upon, that changes the very shape of the human mind, is not manufactured by any clever art. It is grown, slowly and secretly, by the living desert of one lonely world, through the joined lives of creatures great and small. It cannot be rushed. It cannot be copied. It rises out of the deep, patient turning of an entire living planet, and this is part of why it can never be found anywhere else. The Fremen understand this cycle more truly than any of the great powers who covet the spice. They know that the worms and the melange are one, that to harm the one is to threaten the other. They have learned to live alongside the makers, to read the desert's signs, to move without waking what sleeps below, and even, in ways we shall come to later, to master a kind of quiet partnership with the giants of the sand. Where outsiders see only monsters and money, the Fremen see a sacred circle, and they guard their understanding of it as the deepest of secrets. So when you next picture the spice, that fine reddish powder glittering in warm light, let the image widen. Behind each grain lies a vast and living process. Behind it lie the little makers sealing away their pockets of water in the dark. Behind it lies the slow chemistry of a dry and ancient desert. Behind it lies the pre-spice mass swelling and bursting beneath the dunes. And behind it, above all, lies the great sandworm, moving in silent majesty through the deep sand, guardian and maker and keeper of the melange all at once. The Fremen give the greatest of these worms a name of deep respect, and they see in them something close to the divine, for they know that their whole world and the treasure it gives to the stars rests upon the backs of these ancient creatures. To harm the worms would be to end the spice. To end the spice would be to silence the empire. And so, without ever meaning to, the makers of Arrakis hold in their vast and patient bodies a power greater than any fleet or throne. A truth the Fremen have long understood, and the great houses are slow to see. It is a strange and wondrous thing to rest upon as sleep draws near. This idea that the treasure of an entire civilization is grown by worms in a desert, born out of the joining of water and sand and time. The universe leans upon its empires, and its empires lean upon the spice, and the spice leans upon these vast and gentle giants turning slowly beneath the dunes of one quiet world. There is nothing to fear in the thought, only the deep calm of something ancient and unhurried, moving through the dark far below. Up next in Chapter 4, Not a Drug, but a Doorway, we'll set aside the simple idea of the spice as an intoxicant and begin to see it for what it truly is, the key that changes the very shape of the human mind. For all that has been said of the spice so far, of its worth and its danger and its strange desert birth, there is a deeper question that has been waiting patiently beneath every word. What does the melange actually do? People call it a drug, and in a narrow sense, the word fits. It is taken into the body, it changes how a person feels, and it holds them fast once they have taken enough. Yet to call the spice merely a drug is to say far too little, for it does something that no ordinary intoxicant has ever done. It does not simply dull or excite the mind, it opens it. The spice is not in truth a drug at all in the way we usually mean. It is a doorway. Consider what an ordinary drug does. It might soften pain, or lift the mood, or bring on sleep, or stir a passing brightness in the senses. Whatever it does, it works within the boundaries of the mind that already exists, nudging feelings this way or that, and then it fades, and the person returns to who they were. The melange is different in kind, not merely in degree. It does not simply move the furniture of the mind about for an evening. Over time, taken deeply, it changes the very rooms, widening the walls of perception until a person begins to sense things that most human beings never knew were there to be sensed at all. At first, the change is quiet, almost gentle. The senses grow keener. Colors seem richer, sounds clearer. The passage of time itself somehow more present, as though the person has stepped a little closer to the world and can feel its texture more finely. The mind grows quicker and steadier, able to hold more, to see patterns where before there was only confusion. For those who take the spice lightly, this is often all they know of it, a heightening, a brightening, a sharpening of ordinary life. And even this much would be enough to make the melange prized across the empire. But the doorway goes far deeper than heightened senses, and this is where the true strangeness of the spice begins. Taken deeply enough, over long enough, by the right kind of mind, the melange does something that ought to be impossible. It loosens the grip of ordinary time upon human awareness. It lets the mind slip, if only a little, beyond the narrow present moment into which all of us are usually locked. Those who go deepest into the spice begin to sense not only what is, but what might be, catching faint glimpses of paths not yet walked, of futures not yet arrived. The doorway, it turns out, opens onto time itself. This is a power so vast and so unsettling that whole orders of the empire have arranged themselves around it, each seeking to master a different corner of what the spice makes possible. Some use its gift of expanded awareness to guide great ships safely across distances no ordinary eye could cross. Some use its stirring of hidden memory to reach back into the past and wake the voices of ancestors long dead. Some use its heightening of body and mind to achieve a control over themselves so complete that it seems to outsiders like sorcery. And a rare few, touched by the spice in just the right way, begin to see so far and so clearly across the branching paths of time that they become something more and something stranger than merely human. It is worth pausing to feel how large a reframing this is. When the great powers of the empire speak of the spice, they often speak of it as a commodity, a thing to be mined and shipped and sold, a source of wealth and long life, and it is all of those things. But beneath the trade and the treasure lies this quieter, deeper truth. The melange is a key that fits the lock of human consciousness itself. It does not add something foreign to the mind so much as it unlocks something that was always faintly there, some hidden capacity of awareness that the spice alone can open. That is why it can never be dismissed as a simple vice. To take the spice deeply is to change what you are able to perceive, and in changing that, to change, in some measure, what you are. There is, of course, a shadow across this doorway, and it would be wrong to speak only of the wonder. Every door that opens one way can close another. The very gift that widens perception also binds the one who receives it. For the deeper a person passes through the doorway of the spice, the less able they become to ever step back out of it. The mind that has learned to see by the light of the melange cannot easily return to the ordinary dark. And so the doorway is also, in its way, a threshold that cannot be uncrossed, a passage into a wider world from which there is no simple road home. We shall come to that shadow more fully in time, gently, without alarm. But tonight, as sleep gathers, let the gentler wonder hold. For there is something quietly beautiful in this idea, that a substance grown by worms in a desert could be, of all things, a doorway of the mind. Not a weapon, not merely a treasure, but a key. The spice does not conquer the person who takes it, at least not at first. It invites, it opens, it shows the mind reaches and depths it did not know it had, and in doing so, it turns the whole question of the melange from one of chemistry into one of wonder. What is a substance that can widen human awareness itself? It is no longer only a drug. It is something for which our ordinary words were never quite made. This is the reframing that lies at the very center of our long, slow story. The spice is often named a drug, and the name is not wholly wrong, and yet it misses almost everything that matters. Behind the simple word lies a doorway, and behind the doorway lie powers that shape the history of 10,000 worlds. The gift of longer life, which we have already touched, the strange changing of the body and the deep blue of the eyes, the folding of space and the pilots who steer through it, the ancient sisterhood and its sacred, deadly rites, the vision of time itself and the one who would come to see all its paths at once. Each of these is a room beyond the doorway, and the spice is the key to them all. And so we set aside, gently and for good, the small idea of the spice as merely something to be craved. In its place, we hold a larger and truer image, the melange as a threshold of perception, a quiet opener of the human mind, a doorway standing in the desert of one lonely world, waiting for those who dare to step through. Everything that follows in our story is, in one way or another, a walk through that doorway, deeper and deeper, into the strange and luminous heart of what the spice truly is. Let the thoughts settle softly now, without effort, without any need to grasp it. A doorway in the desert, a key that opens the mind, a reddish powder that turns out to be far more than it seems, gentle and patient and vast, waiting quietly beneath the sands of one distant world, while the empire above it dreams of wealth and never quite sees the wonder for what it is. There is time enough in the chapters ahead to walk through slowly. For now it is enough simply to stand at the threshold and breathe, and let the calm of the desert night carry you toward rest. Up next, in Chapter 5, What the Spice Does to the Body, we'll follow the melange as it works its slow way into a person, pervading the food and air of Arrakis until the body itself is quietly changed by its touch. Tonight, we turn our slow attention inward, away from the great dunes and the turning stars, and toward the quiet country of the human body, and what the spice does once it has entered there. For all its vast and terrible reputation, the melange begins its work in the smallest and most ordinary of ways. In a breath, in a mouthful, in the faint cinnamon warmth that hangs over everything on the planet called Arrakis. There is no ceremony required, no single dramatic dose, no line drawn between the moment before and the moment after. The spice does not announce itself. It simply arrives, gently and continually, and settles in and stays. To understand this, you must first understand how utterly the spice pervades the world where it is born. On Arrakis, the melange is not a rare treasure locked away in vaults, though off-world it becomes exactly that. On its home planet, it is in the dust that blows across every threshold, in the grit that gathers in the folds of clothing, in the film that coats the lips and settles on the tongue. It rides the wind out of the deep desert and drifts through the crowded warrens of the cities. It flavors the food, faint and sweet and everywhere, so that a person born on Arrakis has tasted spice since before memory begins. The very air carries it, a soft haze of it, so that merely to breathe on that world, night after night and year after year, is to take the spice into oneself in a slow and constant tide. No one on Arrakis truly abstains. To live there at all is to be seasoned by it from within. And so the melange enters the body not as a shock, but as a saturation. It works its way into the blood and into the tissues, into the deep and hidden chemistry of a living person, so gradually that there is rarely any single day one could point to and say the change began there. The body drinks it in through the food and the air and the ever-present dust, and over months and then years the spice becomes woven into the ordinary workings of the flesh. It is not a visitor passing through. It becomes part of the fabric. The body learns to expect it, to lean on it, to build its daily rhythms around its steady presence, until the spice is no longer something the person merely takes, but something the person has quietly become. At first, the gifts of this saturation are gentle and welcome. The spice sharpens the senses and steadies the nerves. It lends a subtle vitality, a quickness to the mind, and a resilience to the body, a feeling of being more awake and more alive than one had been before. Those who work close to the desert, who breathe the raw spice as it rises from the sand, often speak of a clarity that comes with it, a heightening of awareness, as though the edges of the world had been drawn a little sharper and the colors made a little deeper. In small measure, the melange is a tonic, a preserver, a quiet strengthener of the whole living system. It is easy, in those early years, to feel only the blessing of it, and to notice nothing of the price. But the chemistry of the spice is subtle beyond ordinary reckoning, and its reach into the body is total. It does not touch one organ and leave the rest untouched. It infuses everything, threading itself through the deep processes by which the body renews and repairs and carries itself forward through time. And because it becomes so completely bound into those processes, the body slowly reshapes itself around the spice. The ordinary balance of the flesh shifts to include it, to require it, to treat its constant presence as the natural state of things. This is the slow and total way the melange works. It does not merely add something to a person. It rewrites, quietly and over long years, what that person's body considers normal and needful. This is why the dependence that follows is so unlike the sudden cravings of an ordinary appetite. It is not a hunger that flares and fades. It is a deep structural reliance, laid down layer by layer across the whole span of a life. The body of a long saturated person has been remade around the spice so thoroughly that the melange is no longer a luxury laid on top of health, but a foundation stone beneath it. To have the spice is simply to feel well and whole. Its steady presence becomes indistinguishable from the ordinary sensation of being alive. And this is precisely what makes it so gentle a trap, for nothing feels wrong along the way. There is no warning ache, no visible mark in those early years, only the soft accumulation of well-being, only the pleasant sense that one is thriving. Consider the Fremen, the desert people of Arrakis, whose whole existence is steeped in the spice from birth. Their diet is threaded through with it. Their air is thick with it. Their everyday unfolds within its haze. For them, the melange is not a rare indulgence, but the plain substance of daily life, as constant and unremarked as bread or water might be elsewhere. and so their bodies are among the most deeply saturated in all the known worlds, seasoned through and through by a lifetime of the spice, remade by it down to the smallest and most hidden chemistry. What is exotic and precious across the empire is, to them, simply the taste of home. They do not think of themselves as taking a drug at all. They are only living on the world where they were born, breathing the air that world gives them. Off-world, far from the sands, the wealthy and the powerful take their spice in careful, measured doses, a costly seasoning at the tables of the great, a mark of status and a source of the same subtle vitality. But even there, taken steadily enough and long enough, the melange follows the same slow logic. It enters, it saturates, it binds itself in, and it makes the body its own. The difference is only one of degree and of pace, not of kind. Wherever it is taken and however it is taken, the spice works inward with the same patient thoroughness, gathering the flesh gently around itself until the two can no longer easily be parted. And here we begin to glimpse the truth that the whole of our telling circles toward, that the spice is a doorway and a chain at once, and that both the opening and the binding happen in the quiet dark of the body, long before the mind understands what has occurred. The melange gives, and in the giving it takes hold. It strengthens, and in the strengthening it entwines. Its subtle chemistry is generous and total together, a single motion that cannot be divided into the gift and the cost, because they are the same motion seen from two sides. To be filled with the spice is to be blessed and bound in one breath. For tonight it is enough to rest in this simple picture. Picture the melange entering softly, on the air and in the food, and in the endless drifting dust, so quietly that no one marks the hour. Picture it settling into the deep places of the body, spreading, saturating, becoming part of the very rhythm of a life. Picture the slow and gentle way a person becomes, over years and without alarm, a creature of the spice. There is nothing frightening in it tonight, only the soft, steady inwardness of it, the patient tide of it, rising and rising through the quiet chambers of the flesh. Picture how gently it comes, on nothing more than a breath and a taste and a fine drift of dust, and how completely it makes its home. Let that image carry you, slow and warm, without effort and without hurry, toward the soft and welcome edge of sleep. Up next, in Chapter 6, The Blue Within Blue Eyes, we'll follow this deep saturation to the surface at last, and look upon the strange and beautiful mark it leaves in the eyes of those the spice has claimed most fully. Tonight, we come to the one visible sign of all that hidden inward change, the single mark that the spice writes plainly upon a person for all the world to see. For though the melange does most of its long, slow work in the deep and secret chambers of the body, in the blood and the tissue and the quiet chemistry beneath the skin, there is one place where its presence rises at last to the surface and becomes plain to any watching eye. That place is the eyes themselves. Among the deeply saturated, and above all among the fremen of the desert, the eyes take on a color like no other in the known worlds. A color that has become across the empire a byword and a legend. The whites of the eye and the iris both turn to a deep and luminous blue, a blue within blue, so that the whole of the eye seems to glow with the same rich color, without contrast, without pale edges, one seamless field of darkened sky. The Fremen have an old name for this mark. They call it the eyes of Ibad, and they wear it not with shame, but as a plain fact of their being, as ordinary among their people as any other feature of a face. To grow up in the deep desert, breathing the spice-laden air and eating the spice-threaded food from the first days of life, is to grow these eyes as surely as a child anywhere grows into the shape of its parents. Among the Fremen, the blue within blue is universal, so common that its absence would be the strange thing, the sign of an outsider, of one not truly of the sand. It is the color of belonging, the visible proof that a person is a child of Arrakis through and through, saturated by the spice from birth to the very depths. The cause of it is exactly the long saturation we followed in the chapter before. The melange, taken in constant measure across the whole span of a life, gathers itself so thoroughly through the body that it changes even the coloring of the eyes. It is not a sudden staining, but a slow deepening, appearing gradually as the spice accumulates, growing richer and more complete the longer and the more heavily a person is steeped in the melange. In this way, the eyes become a kind of quiet record, a mark written in living color that tells how deeply the spice has entered a person. The deeper the blue, the deeper the saturation. The eyes of Ibad are, in their way, an honest ledger of a lifetime spent within the spice, and so the eyes are a badge. Among the Fremen, they are the mark of the true desert folk, of those hardened and shaped by the sands, of a people who have made their home in the most unforgiving country in the known worlds and been remade by it. To bear the blue within blue is to carry the desert in one's very gaze, and among the Fremen there is a quiet dignity in it, a sign of identity and of shared endurance. It is the color of the tribe, the color of the Sietch, the color of all those who breathe the same spice and walk the same burning sand. When Fremen look upon one another and see that deep and total blue, they see kinship written plainly. They see their own kind. Yet the same mark is also, and at the same time, a warning. For those eyes announce not only belonging, but bondage. They are the outward sign of a dependence so complete that it can never be undone. The visible proof that the spice has bound itself into a person past any hope of parting. To bear the eyes of Ibad is to be marked as one who cannot now live without the melange, one whose very flesh has been remade around it. The beauty of that deep blue and the trap within it are the same thing seen twice, for the color that speaks of a life steeped in the spice speaks equally of a life that the spice will never again release. The badge and the warning are one, inseparable, glowing together in the same still gaze. This double meaning shows itself most sharply when one looks beyond the desert people to others whom the spice has claimed. For the blue within blue is not the possession of the Fremen alone. Any human being who takes the melange deeply enough and long enough will in time grow the same mark, wherever they were born and whatever their station. The heavy users found here and there across the empire, those who take the spice in great and constant measure, come at last to bear the tinted eyes as well, the telltale blue creeping into the whites and the iris as the saturation mounts. In them, the color carries no pride of belonging, no kinship of the Sietch. It speaks only of appetite and of dependence, a plain and public confession that the spice has taken hold. The mark that is a crown among the Fremen is, in the wider worlds, a shadow. There is a strange gentleness even in this, when one sits quietly with it. The eyes do not lie, and they do not hide. They cannot be argued with or wished away. They simply state, in silent color, what has already come to pass within. A person may not feel the depth of their own saturation, may notice only the steady well being the spice provides, may never consciously mark the day the dependence became complete. But the eyes keep the true account. They deepen quietly toward that total blue, and in doing so, they tell the truth that the body has been keeping all along, that the spice is fully home, that it has entered past all recall, that the doorway and the chain have both been passed through. Picture those eyes now, in the calm of the desert night. Picture a Fremen face turned toward the great cold field of stars, the eyes within it a deep and luminous blue, blue upon blue, without pale edge or contrast, glowing softly like twin pools of darkened sky. There is a great stillness in such a gaze, a settledness, the look of a people entirely at home in a world that would kill almost anyone else. The color holds no fear and asks no pity. It is simply what a lifetime in the spice looks like when it rises at last to the surface and shows itself plainly. It is the desert made visible in a single face. And picture, too, how across the whole scattered empire that same color quietly appears, one pair of eyes at a time, in every place the spice is taken deeply. A merchant grown wealthy, a noble grown fond of the melange at their table, a worker long employed near the harvest, each in their turn finding the blue creep into their gaze, each marked by the same slow chemistry that marks the desert folk. The empire is stitched together, in part, by this shared and silent sign, this common color blooming in the eyes of all whom the spice has taken, a quiet blue thread running through 1,000 distant worlds. For tonight, it is enough to rest in the color itself, that deep and gentle blue, and in the calm truth it carries. Let it be, for now, simply beautiful, a still and luminous thing, the desert's own hue shining softly out of a human face. Let go, for tonight, of the warning folded within it, and keep only the color itself, that deep and gentle blue, that seamless field of darkened sky. Let it settle over your thoughts like the last blue light of evening settling slowly over the dunes, cool and deep and quieting, drawing you softly and steadily down toward rest. Up next, in Chapter 7, The Gift of Longer Life, we'll follow the spice deeper still into the body and learn how the same substance that colors the eyes can stretch a human life far beyond its natural span. Tonight, we come to what may be the most coveted of all the spice's gifts, the one that has drawn the powerful of the empire to the melange more surely than any other, more than the sharpened senses, or the quiet vitality, or the mark of the deep blue eyes. For the spice does not merely make a person feel more alive. Taken steadily and deeply across the long years, it can stretch the very span of a human life, holding back the slow erosions of age, preserving health and vigor far beyond what any natural body could keep on its own. In a universe where death comes for all, the melange offers something that looks very much like a reprieve, and it is this above all that men and women have hungered for across the ages. The gift works quietly, as everything about the spice works quietly. There is no single drought of youth, no sudden reversal of the years. Instead, the melange, woven so completely into the deep chemistry of the body, tends and preserves the living system from within, slowing the ordinary decay that time lays upon the flesh. It sustains vitality where vitality would otherwise fade. It keeps the body supple and the mind clear well past the season, when both would ordinarily begin to dim. A person long steeped in the spice may carry the strength and sharpness of their prime through decades that would leave another bent and gray. The melange does not stop time altogether, but it stretches it, thins it, holds it gently at bay, so that the arc of a life grows longer, and its bright middle stretches on and on. Among those who could afford it, this gift made the spice beyond price. The great houses of the empire, the wealthy, the highborn, all those with the means to take the melange in constant measure, found in it something that no treasure and no army could otherwise buy. More years, more vigor, more time in the fullness of their powers. For the aged and the powerful, whose whole lives had been spent gathering wealth and station, The spice offered the one thing that all their gathering could not otherwise secure: the chance to keep enjoying it, to hold off the ending, to remain strong and sharp and present in the world for a span that ordinary flesh would never allow. And so the melange became not only a luxury, but a kind of quiet immortality traded among the great, a thread of borrowed years spun out at enormous cost. The Fremen of the desert, steeped in the spice from birth, live within this gift as within the air they breathe. Their bodies, saturated through and through by a lifetime of the melange, carry a hardness and a longevity that the soft dwellers of gentler worlds can scarcely imagine. In the harshest country in all the known worlds, where water is precious past reckoning and every day is a labor against the sand, the desert people endure with a toughness that seems almost beyond the human, and much of that endurance is the quiet work of the spice within them. It preserves them, tempers them, lends their bodies a resilience that matches the fierceness of their world. For the Fremen, the long reach of the melange is not a purchased luxury, but simply a part of what it means to be a child of Arrakis. Yet the gift, like every gift of the spice, comes bound to its cost, and the cost is exactly the dependence we have followed through the chapters before. For the very completeness that makes the melange so powerful a preserver is also what makes it so total a master. To gain the long years, a person must take the spice deeply and constantly, and to take it so is to be remade around it past all undoing. The vitality is real, but it is borrowed, and it is borrowed against a debt that can never be repaid and never escaped. The longer life the spice grants is a life bound wholly to the spice. The reprieve from death is purchased with a surrender to the melange so complete that the two can no longer be told apart. This is the trap folded inside the gift, and it is a trap all the more perfect for being made of the gift itself. The spice does not preserve the body and then, separately, enslave it. It preserves the body by binding itself into the very processes of life. And so the preservation and the bondage are one and the same act. To be granted the long years is to be made a creature of the melange down to the deepest chemistry. The person who has taken the spice deeply enough to lengthen their days has thereby also passed the point where the spice can ever be set aside. The doorway to more life and the chain that binds one to the spice are, once again, not two things, but one. And so the long life the melange offers is a strange and doubled prize. It is genuine. The years are real. The vigor is real. The holding back of age is no illusion. A person may indeed walk the worlds strong and clear for a span far beyond their natural allotment, and feel, through all those added years, only the steady blessing of the spice. But every one of those years is a year owed wholly to the melange, a year that could not have been had without it and cannot be kept without it still. The gift is real and the price is total, and the two arrive together, inseparable, in the very same slow tide that fills the body with the spice. There is something almost tender in this, seen in the quiet of the night, something that speaks to the oldest of human longings. For to wish for more life, for more time with those we love, and more days in the light, is among the gentlest and most human of all wishes. The spice answers that wish, and answers it truly, and in the answering it asks everything in return. It is not cruel, and it is not kind. It simply gives what it gives on the terms that it gives it, and those terms are woven into the very substance of the gift. To reach for the longer life is to reach at the same moment for the chain, and there is no way to take the one without the other. Picture, then, a life stretched long by the spice, and hold it gently in your mind as you drift. Picture a person carrying the strength of their prime through decades that should have dimmed them, clear-eyed and steady, sustained from within by the quiet chemistry of the melange. Picture the great ones of the empire trading fortunes for a few more years, and the desert Fremen enduring their harsh world with a toughness born of the same slow gift. Picture the long, slow tide of the spice, holding time itself gently at bay, thinning the years, softening the reach of age. There is no alarm in it tonight, only the quiet wonder of a life extended, a candle sheltered from the wind, burning long and steady in the dark. And rest, too, in the deeper truth beneath it, that everything the spice gives it gives whole and bound together, the vitality and the dependence, the long years and the surrender, the doorway and the chain. That is the shape of the melange, always and everywhere, and it is a shape worth holding softly in the mind as sleep draws near. This single substance that gives so richly and binds so completely, both at once in the same slow motion. Let the wonder of it be enough tonight, the quiet marvel of a life stretched long and held gently against the years, and let it carry you, unhurried and untroubled, down toward your own deep rest. Up next in Chapter 8, the Spacing Guild and the Folding of Space will rise from the body and its long years to the great empty spaces between the stars and learn how the spice makes it possible to cross them. Tonight we lift our gaze from the body and its long, slow years and turn it outward to the vast dark distances that lie between the stars. For the spice does far more than change the flesh of those who take it. It reaches out across the empty gulfs of space itself and makes possible the one thing without which the whole sprawling empire of Dune could not exist. The crossing of those immense distances, the travel between worlds, the folding of space that binds 1,000 scattered planets into a single civilization. And the power to do this belongs to one body alone, a quiet and secretive organization known across the known worlds as the Spacing Guild. To understand the Guild, you must first understand the peculiar shape of the universe it moves through. Long before the age of Dune, in a great upheaval remembered as a turning point in all human history, the thinking machines were cast down and forbidden forever. The people of that time had risen against the computers and the artificial minds that had come to rule and to threaten them, and in their victory they laid down a commandment that would shape every age to come, that no machine should ever again be made in the likeness of a human mind. And so the Empire of Dune is a universe without computers, without artificial intelligence, without the calculating machines that might otherwise guide a ship across the deadly emptiness between the stars. Where such minds once served, humankind was forced instead to develop the powers of living human beings, trained and heightened, and, above all, steeped in the spice. For space travel in this universe is not a simple thing of engines and patience. To cross the enormous distances between worlds within any bearable span of time, the great ships of the Guild do not merely fly through space. They fold it. Thrua means the Guild guards more jealously than any secret in the Empire. A ship can pass from one point in the vastness to another far distant point without truly crossing the space between, as though the great sheet of the universe were bent so that two faraway places touched and the ship slipped across the join. This is the folding of space, and it is the beating heart of all travel and all trade and all power in the worlds of Dune. Without it, the Empire would fly apart into 1,000 isolated worlds, each marooned in its own corner of the dark, cut off from all the rest by distances too vast for any ordinary crossing. But the folding of space is perilous beyond reckoning. To bend the universe and pass a great ship through the join is to gamble with catastrophe. For the smallest error in the passage means annihilation, a ship and all its souls lost forever in the dark between. And in a universe forbidden its thinking machines, there is no computer to plot the safe path through, no artificial mind to calculate the way. The safe crossing demands something no machine could supply and no ordinary human could achieve. It demands the power to see the path before the ship takes it, to glimpse the safe road through the fold before committing to the passage, to know in advance which way leads through and which way leads to ruin. And that power, the power to see a little way into what is to come, is a gift of the spice. Here the two great threads of our telling draw together, the spice within the body and the spice across the stars. For it is the melange, and the melange alone, that grants the prescient sight by which the guild folds space in safety. Those who guide the great ships take the spice in measures beyond anything the desert fremen or the wealthy of the empire ever know, saturating themselves so utterly in it that their sight reaches forward through time, mapping the safe course through the fold before the ship is ever committed to it. Without the spice there is no prescience, and without prescience there is no safe folding of space, and without the safe folding of space there is no empire at all, only a scattering of lonely worlds, adrift in the endless dark. The whole vast web of human civilization hangs upon this single thread, that the melange makes the crossing possible. And so the Spacing Guild holds a power greater, in its silent way, than any emperor or any great house. For the guild alone possesses the means and the trained servants to fold space, and every other power in the empire, however mighty, depends upon it utterly. No army can march between the stars without the guild's ships to carry it. No trade can flow from world to world without the guild's passage. No emperor can rule a scattered empire. No house can reach its distant holdings. No message or fleet or fortune can cross the great dark without the guild. The guild is the one road between all the worlds, and it holds that road alone. This is its monopoly, complete and unbreakable, resting on a secret it guards with an obsession that borders on the sacred. The guild wields this power quietly, and that quietness is itself a kind of strength. It does not seek thrones or provinces or the trappings of open rule. It has no need of them. It holds something far deeper than any crown, the sole means of movement in a universe that cannot move without it, and from that hidden height it watches and waits and takes its due. It keeps its methods secret, its inner workings hidden, its true servants unseen by the wider worlds. It asks only that the spice keep flowing, for the spice is the one thing it cannot do without, the substance on which its whole power rests. And so the guild, for all its silence, is bound as tightly to the melange as any addict of the desert, tied to Arrakis and its sands by a dependence as total as it is discreet. Consider what this means for the shape of the whole empire. Every power that matters, the emperor upon his throne, the proud great houses with their fleets and their fortunes, the ancient sisterhoods and the merchant combines, all of them, however they scheme against one another, are united in one silent need. They all depend upon the guild, and the guild depends upon the spice. And so the melange, that strange dust born of the desert worms of a single harsh world, becomes the hidden pivot on which the entire universe turns. It is not merely a drug taken by individuals for its gifts. It is the very possibility of an empire, the thing that binds the stars together, the substance without which the whole great structure of human civilization would collapse into silence and isolation. Picture it then, as you drift toward rest. Picture the great ships of the guild, vast beyond imagining, waiting in the dark. Picture the fold opening before them, the impossible bending of the universe so that far things touch, and the safe road through it seen in advance by minds steeped past all measure in the spice. Picture the ships slipping silently across the join, from one distant world to another, carrying the whole traffic of an empire upon a power that only the melange can grant. And picture, at the root of all of it, that quiet dust rising from the desert sands, holding the stars themselves together. And picture how all of it, the ships and the folds and the far-touching worlds, rests in the end upon that quiet marvel. The spice-steeped sight that sees the safe road before the crossing is made. There is a great and gentle vastness in it. A slow and silent turning of ships and worlds. And it asks nothing of you tonight but to be wondered at, softly and without effort, as you sink deeper and deeper towards sleep. Up next in Chapter 9, the navigators, remade by Spice, will go aboard those great ships at last and meet the strange transformed beings whose spice-steeped sight steers them safely through the folds of space. Now we come to one of the strangest figures in all of Dune, a being who was once an ordinary man or woman and who has been changed so completely by the spice that the word human no longer quite fits. These are the guild navigators, the silent pilots who steer the great ships across the folded darkness between the stars. In the last chapter, we spoke of the Spacing Guild and the way it holds a quiet monopoly over all travel in the Empire. Tonight, we go inside that monopoly, into the dim tanks and the orange haze, to look upon the ones who make the impossible journeys possible. Let your breathing slow as we go, for there is nothing frightening here, only something old and vast and gentle in its own way, floating far above the worlds. Imagine, first, that these were not always strange creatures. Every navigator began life as a person like any other, born on some world of the Empire, walking on two legs, breathing ordinary air, seeing time the way all people see it, one moment following another with the future hidden just beyond reach. But the guild takes certain of its people and gives them a task that no ordinary mind can perform. To fold space, to leap from one point among the stars to another without crossing the distance between, a ship must move through a fold in the fabric of the universe. And in that fold, there lie dangers unseen, currents and hazards that could scatter a vessel into dust. To pass through safely, someone aboard must be able to see the path before the ship takes it. Someone must be able to look a little way into the future and choose the route on which the ship arrives whole. The spice makes this seeing possible. And so the guild immerses its chosen navigators in melange, not in the small measured doses that season the food of the wealthy, but in quantities so enormous that the substance saturates every part of them. They breathe it, they float within it. Over years, the concentrated spice gas fills their lungs and soaks through their flesh, and works upon the deepest structures of the body and the brain. Slowly, without pain but without mercy either, the person begins to change. The proportions of the body shift. The limbs grow thin and strange, no longer needed for walking, for a navigator does not walk. The head swells to hold the vast and endless computations of prescient sight, while the face softens and alters until it can hardly be recognized as the face it once was. This is the great cost of what the spice makes them. A navigator is a mutant, remade in body and in mind by a lifetime bathed in melange. The change is not a sickness and not an accident, but the very purpose of the immersion, a slow and deliberate reshaping of a human being into an instrument that can do what no unchanged mind could ever do. And once it has been done, there is no undoing it. The navigator cannot return to the life left behind, cannot step out into the sunlight of a garden or walk the corridors of a palace among ordinary people. They can no longer live in the ordinary air of ordinary rooms. Instead, each one dwells within a sealed tank, a great chamber of thick glass and metal filled with the orange gas of concentrated spice. The very element that changed them, and the only element in which they can now survive. Within that swirling cloud they float, weightless and slow, their altered forms drifting like something deep beneath the sea. To the few who have glimpsed them, they seem less like people than like creatures of another world, and in a sense, they have become exactly that, citizens of a country that only the deepest spice can reveal. Yet for all their strangeness, the navigators are not monsters, and they are not mad. Within those tanks, their minds are working at a level far beyond common thought. Steeped in melange, a navigator's awareness spreads outward across the near reaches of time. They do not see the whole of the future, and they do not see it clearly, for prescience is never a bright and certain window. Instead, they see paths, faint threads of possibility branching forward, a shifting landscape of what might be. When the guild ship prepares to fold space, the navigator looks along those threads and finds the one on which the vessel emerges safely on the far side, light years away, unharmed, then, guiding the great engines with a sureness no machine could match. The navigator steers the ship along that single safe path through the fold, and in a breath, the impossible distance is crossed. Remember that in this universe, there are no thinking machines to do such work. Long before the age of Dune, humankind rose up against the computers and artificial minds that had come to rule and nearly to replace them. And in the aftermath, they forbade forever the making of any machine in the likeness of a human mind. So there is no computer that can calculate a safe passage through folded space. There is only the living, spice-changed mind of the navigator, and this is why the guild guards its navigators so closely, and why the whole of interstellar travel rests upon them. Without these strange floating pilots, the ships could not safely fly, and without the ships, the thousands of worlds of the Empire would drift apart into silence and isolation, each one alone beneath its own sun. Think, for a moment, of the loneliness and the wonder of such an existence. A navigator has traded the whole ordinary life of a human being, the feeling of wind, the taste of unspiced food, the simple shape of a familiar face in a mirror, for a life spent floating in orange mist, gazing forever into the branching corridors of time. They have given up the ground beneath their feet and gained the stars instead. They no longer belong to any single world, for they move between all of them, and yet they are more bound to the spice than any other living creature, unable to leave their tanks even for a moment. The melange that expanded their sight has also sealed them inside it. In them, more than in anyone else, we see both the gift and the price of the spice drawn to its furthest edge, the doorway and the chain made into one body. And so the Empire turns, quietly, upon these hidden pilots. The great families feast and scheme upon their worlds. The merchants trade, the armies march, and none of it would be possible if not for the navigators drifting in their sealed chambers, breathing the spice, watching the future, choosing again and again the safe path through the dark. They ask for nothing but more melange, an endless supply of the substance that made them and that sustains them. They keep the ships flying and the worlds connected, and they keep their own knowledge close, revealing as little as they can of what they see and what they are. Even the most powerful rulers of the Empire treat the guild with careful respect, for everyone understands, without needing to say it aloud, that the ones who control the roads between the stars hold a quiet power over everything. Let that picture settle softly in your mind as you drift, the vast ships waiting in the void, and within each one, a single changed being floating in orange light, seeing the way forward through folded space. They are perhaps the strangest thing the spice has ever made, and they show us how far the melange can carry a human being from the shape in which they began. From ordinary breath to endless drifting sight, all of it wrought by the dust of one desert world. Up next, in Chapter 10, the Bene Gesserit and the Reverend Mothers, we will turn from the floating pilots of the guild to a very different order of spice-touched women, a secret sisterhood who use the melange not to steer ships, but to master their own bodies and minds, and to reach back into the memory of all who came before them. Tonight we turn from the floating navigators of the guild to a very different order of people who have bound their lives to the spice, an ancient and secret sisterhood whose name is spoken with a mixture of awe and unease across the empire. They are the Bene Gesserit, and though they command no armies and rule no worlds openly, they have shaped the course of history for thousands of years from the shadows behind thrones. Let your body grow heavy and still as we speak of them, for their story is one of patience and quiet mastery, of long centuries of careful work, and the melange lies close to the heart of it all. The Bene Gesserit are a sisterhood, an order made up of women who have trained since childhood in disciplines so demanding that few outside their walls can even imagine them. They are teachers and advisors, wives and mothers placed with great care among the noble houses, keepers of secret knowledge and quiet influence. But most of all, they are students of the human being, of the body and the mind, seeking to master both completely. Where others see the flesh as something that simply happens to a person, the sisters of the Bene Gesserit learn to command it from within. They can slow their own hearts, alter the chemistry of their blood, control each muscle down to the smallest thread, and endure pain that would break an ordinary will. Their training gives them a stillness and a poise that seem almost more than human. And in a sense, that is exactly what they are reaching toward. Into this long and patient discipline, the spice enters as a quiet helper. The melange sharpens awareness and deepens the mind's reach, and the sisters, so skilled in observing and steering their own inner workings, find that spice aids them in ways it never aids the careless user. It heightens their perception, letting them read the smallest signs in another person, the flicker of a muscle, the faint change in a breath, the tiny tightening of a voice that betrays a hidden thought. A trained sister can watch a person and know when they speak falsely, can weigh a mood, can sense what lies beneath the surface of a face. The spice, taken with knowledge and control, becomes one more instrument in the great orchestra of their awareness, helping them to see the truth of the people around them and to guide those people gently toward the ends the sisterhood desires. Yet the deepest use of the spice among the Bene Gesserit lies in a rite that stands at the very center of their order, the passage by which an ordinary sister becomes one of the most powerful figures the sisterhood knows, a Reverend Mother. This is no small promotion and no simple ceremony. It is a trial that carries the sister to the edge of death and, if she is strong enough, brings her back transformed. In this ordeal, she takes into her body a substance of terrible potency, a poison that would kill almost anyone outright, and she must use every ounce of her hard-won mastery over her own flesh to change that poison within her, to transmute it from something deadly into something she can survive. We will speak more fully of that substance and that transformation in the chapter to come, for it deserves a telling of its own. What matters here is what such a woman becomes when the trial is past. For when a sister survives the ordeal and rises as a Reverend Mother, something extraordinary has opened inside her. She gains access to a vast inheritance of memory, the remembered lives of countless women who came before her, mother and grandmother, and back through the long generations. An unbroken chain of ancestral experience now living within her own mind. She becomes, in a sense, a library of everyone who came before, able to draw upon their knowledge, their wisdom, their skills, their memories of ages long past. This inner company is called the other memory, and it is the great treasure and the great burden of the Reverend Mothers. Through it, the sisterhood holds a continuity of knowledge that stretches back further than any written record, a living memory that no fire can burn and no conqueror can seize. It is one of the deepest secrets they guard, and the spice is the key that unlocks it. Consider how much of the sisterhood's long power grows out of this single gift. Ordinary orders and institutions forget. Their leaders die. Their records are lost. Their purposes drift and change across the centuries until the founders would no longer recognize them. But the Bene Gesserit carry their past inside themselves. Generation after generation, each Reverend Mother joined to the chain of all who came before. Because of this, they can hold to a single vast purpose across thousands of years without wavering, working patiently toward goals so distant that no one alive at the beginning could hope to see them fulfilled. They plant seeds meant to flower centuries later. They guide bloodlines across dozens of generations, arranging marriages among the great houses with the slow care of gardeners tending a tree that will not bloom in their lifetimes. And through all of it, the spice-born memory keeps the purpose alive and unbroken. Consider, too, how carefully the sisters must ration and guard their use of the spice, for they are not floating pilots sealed away in tanks of gas, but women who move openly through the courts and households of the empire, wearing the appearance of ordinary counselors and companions. They cannot afford to be marked too plainly by the melange, and so they take it with measure and intention, drawing on its gifts without surrendering themselves to it the way a careless user might. In this restraint we see again the great theme of the sisterhood, that every power they hold is bought with discipline, and that the spice serves them precisely because they refuse to let it master them. There is a discipline to it too, a hardness that the sisters accept as the price of their power. They train themselves against fear, reciting inwardly a litany that empties the mind of terror and lets clear thought return. They learn to set aside their own desires for the sake of the long work. They accept lives spent as advisors and instruments, rarely praised, often distrusted, moving quietly behind the great events of the age rather than standing openly within them. Many across the empire fear them and call them witches, whispering that their calm and their insight come from something unnatural. And in truth, their powers do come from something few can share. From a marriage of endless discipline and the strange gifts of the melange, honed over a span of time so long that its beginning is lost in legend. So picture them now, as sleep draws nearer, a company of women in dark robes, still and watchful, moving through the courts of 1,000 worlds. They speak softly and reveal little. They watch everything. Within the eldest of them lives the remembered voice of every mother before her, a quiet crowd of ancestors reaching back into the deep past and running through all their mastery, feeding their perception and unlocking their memory, is the same shimmering dust we have followed from the first chapter, the spice of Arrakis, doing here not the work of steering ships, but the subtler work of shaping minds and preserving the long memory of a patient and secretive order. In them we see yet another face of the melange. For the navigators, it opened the roads between the stars. For the Bene Gesserit, it opens the roads within, into perception so fine it borders on prophecy, and into memory so deep it holds the lives of the dead. Both are gifts of the same substance, and both come only to those willing to give a great part of themselves in exchange. Up next in Chapter 11, The Water of Life, we will follow the sisters into the very heart of their most sacred and most dangerous rite, the deadly drought drawn from a drowned sandworm. And we will see how one who can survive its poison is remade forever, and why the Fremen of the desert hold it holiest of all. Tonight, we come to the most sacred and the most perilous form the spice can take, a substance that stands at the very edge between death and transformation. Among the Fremen of the desert, it is holier than anything else they know, and among the Bene Gesserit, it is the doorway to their deepest powers. It is called the Water of Life, and in the last chapter we caught only a glimpse of it, the poison a sister must survive to become a Reverend Mother. Now let us look upon it fully. Let your breathing settle, and your thoughts grow soft. For though this is a tale of poison and danger, we tell it gently, as one tells an old and reverent story by a low fire. To understand the Water of Life, we must return to the sandworms of Arrakis, the great creatures we met earlier in our journey. We know that the worms and the spice are bound together in a single vast cycle, that the deep desert itself brings forth the melange through the long ages of the worm's life. But there is one particular and terrible way of drawing a substance from a worm, and it lies at the origin of the Water of Life. When one of the little makers, the young form of the sandworm, is drowned in water, something profound occurs. Water is deadly to the sandworm, poison to a creature born of the driest desert, and in its dying the small maker releases a liquid, a bile brought forth by its drowning. This liquid is the raw water of life, and in its untouched state, it is a poison so potent that it would kill almost anyone who swallowed it. Here, we meet the heart of the mystery, the thing that makes the Water of Life more than merely a deadly draught. For while the raw substance is poison to nearly everyone, there exists a rare kind of person who can take it into the body and change it. Such a person, drawing on a mastery of the flesh as deep as any the Bene Gesserit teach, can reach into the very chemistry of the poison as it spreads within them and transmute it, altering it from something lethal into something the body can hold. Something that no longer kills, but instead awakens. This inner transformation is the true rite. It is not enough to drink the Water of Life. One must be able to change it in the space between the first swallow and death, and only those with the rarest training and the strongest will can do so. When such a transformation succeeds, the effect is overwhelming. The changed Water of Life floods the mind with awareness beyond anything ordinary experience can offer. For a Bene Gesserit sister, this is the crossing that makes her a Reverend Mother. As the transmuted substance moves through her, the barriers within her mind fall away, and she is opened to the other memory, that vast inheritance of ancestral lives we spoke of before, the remembered experience of all the women who came before her, reaching back through the generations into the deep past. In a single shattering moment, she is joined to that unbroken chain, no longer a lone woman, but the living inheritor of countless lives. It is a passage of terror and revelation together. And only those strong enough to survive both the poison and the flood of memory come through it whole. Among the Fremen of the desert, the Water of Life holds a place holier still, for it lies at the center of their most sacred gatherings. In the hidden caverns where the Fremen keep their secrets, a Reverend Mother of their own people takes the raw and deadly water and transforms it within her body, and then, in a rite shared among the tribe, the changed substance is given to the gathered people. Once transmuted by the holy woman, it is no longer poison, but something that can be shared. And in the sharing, the Fremen are drawn together into a single deep communion, their awareness opened and joined in a way that binds the whole community. To them, the Water of Life is not a curiosity and not a tool, but a holy thing, the very center of their spiritual life, guarded with reverence and surrounded by long tradition. It is bound up with their oldest beliefs and their hopes, and it is never taken lightly. There is a great and careful knowledge among the Fremen and the sisterhood alike about who may attempt this passage and who may not. For to drink the raw water of life without the power to change it is simply to die. The rite is a threshold that sorts the strong from the unready in the most final way. And there is another mystery folded within it, one that the Bene Gesserit have long pondered across their thousands of years of patient work. For while their sisters can transmute the water and open themselves to the memories of the women who came before, there has always been a boundary they could not cross, a region of the inner memory that no sister could enter, a place of ancestral experience closed to them. They came to believe that only a particular kind of person, one they had sought to bring into the world through their long and secret breeding, might one day be able to drink the water of life and pass through that final closed door, surviving where others could not, and seeing what no Reverend Mother had ever seen. But that is a thread for a later telling. It is worth pausing, too, on how completely this rite binds together the many threads we have been following through our long story. Here is the sandworm, the great creature of the deep desert. Here is the water, so deadly to the worm and so precious to the people of Arrakis. Here is the mastery of the body that the sisterhood has spent thousands of years perfecting. And here is the ancestral memory, the vast inheritance of lives that opens when the poison is changed. All of it meets in a single cup, in a single held breath between death and awakening. Nowhere else does the strangeness of the spice gather itself so tightly into one moment, and nowhere else does so much rest upon the strength of a single mind and a single will. Think, as sleep draws closer, of the strange journey this substance represents. It begins in the drowning of a small desert creature, a moment of death for a young sandworm in the one element most deadly to its kind. From that death comes a poison, and from that poison, in the body of one rare enough and strong enough to change it, comes an awakening of memory and awareness so profound that it stands among the deepest experiences a human being can know. Death becomes a doorway. Poison becomes revelation. In the water of life, the whole strange nature of the spice is drawn to its sharpest point. For here, the gift and the danger are not separate things, but the very same thing, inseparable. The one impossible without the other. And so the desert keeps its holiest secret in the most dangerous of forms. The freemen guard it in their hidden places. The sisters approach it only through long preparation, and all who know of it treat it with the gravity it deserves. It is not a thing to be craved or bought like ordinary spice. It cannot be harvested and sold across the empire. It exists only where the worms are drowned, and only where there is someone with the power to transform what their dying brings forth. In this way, the water of life remains apart from the great trade and the great schemes of the empire, a sacred mystery held close by the people of the desert and the women of the ancient order, each guarding it in their own way. Let that image rest softly in your mind, the low light of a hidden cavern, the gathered people, and the holy woman taking into herself the poison of a drowned maker and changing it, in the space of a breath, into a doorway leading down through all the lives that ever were. Up next in Chapter 12, Prescience, Seeing Through Time, we will follow the deepest spice experiences beyond memory and into the future itself, exploring the strange power to see across time, how it shapes the guild and the sisterhood, and why such sight is as dangerous as it is wondrous. Tonight, we come to perhaps the most wondrous and the most troubling of all the gifts the spice can give, a power that has haunted the dreams of the Empire's greatest orders for thousands of years. It is prescience, the ability to see across time, to glimpse what has not yet come to pass. We have already met its shadow, again and again in our journey, in the navigators who steer their ships through folded space, and in the Reverend Mothers who reach back into ancestral memory. Now we turn to face the power itself. Let your body grow heavy and your thoughts drift slow. For this is a tale of time and vision, and it is best received in the same quiet, unhurried way that such visions are said to come. Prescience is the power to perceive the future, or rather the futures, for one of the first and deepest truths about this sight is that it does not reveal a single fixed road ahead. The deepest spice experiences unlock in certain rare minds a widening of awareness that spreads not only outward across space, but forward across time. To one who possesses it, the future is not hidden behind an unbroken wall. Instead, it opens as a landscape of possibilities, a great branching country of paths, some broad and likely, some narrow and faint, all shifting and folding as choices are made and moments pass. The one who sees does not read a finished book of what will be. They look across a living, changing terrain of what might be, and they must find their way among its many threads. We have already seen how useful even a limited form of this sight can be. The guild navigators, saturated in spice, use their prescience for a single vital purpose: to find the safe path through folded space and steer their ships along it. Theirs is a narrow and practical seeing, focused on the immediate future of the voyage, on which of the branching possibilities leads to safe arrival and which lead to disaster. They do not gaze idly across the wide sweep of history. They look just far enough ahead to keep their vessels whole, and in that narrow glimpse rests the whole traffic of the stars. It is prescience turned to a purpose, disciplined and bounded. And even so, it is enough to make the guild one of the quiet powers of the empire. The Bene Gesserit, too, have long been touched by this power, though they approach it with their characteristic caution. Their heightened awareness, deepened by spice and by their endless discipline, gives them at times a sense of what is coming, an instinct for the shape of events not yet arrived. But the sisterhood knows well how treacherous such sight can be, and they have spent much of their long history studying it, seeking to understand it, and above all seeking to bring into the world a mind that could bear the full weight of prescient vision without being broken by it. For among all the powers the spice offers, the sisters understood this one was the most dangerous to wield and the most dangerous to possess. Why should so marvelous a gift be so perilous? Consider first the burden of it. To glimpse the future, even in part, is to lose a certain innocence about the present. The one who sees a coming sorrow must carry the knowledge of it before it arrives, living twice through every grief, once in vision and once in truth. And the branching nature of the sight brings its own torment, for the seer beholds not only what will likely come, but the countless things that might come, the terrible paths alongside the fair ones, the ruin that waits down roads not yet taken. To hold so many futures in the mind at once is a weight that could crush an ordinary person, and even the strongest may find themselves lost in the vastness of what they behold. There is a subtler danger still, one that the wisest among the orders came to understand only slowly. The act of seeing the future can change the future. When a person of great prescient power looks ahead and chooses a path, their vision and their choice ripple outward, shaping the very events they foresaw. And the deeper the sight, the more it can bind the seer to the road they have seen, until they feel themselves carried along a course laid down by their own vision, unable to step aside from the future they have glimpsed. A powerful seer risks becoming a prisoner of their own foresight, trapped upon a single path precisely because they saw it so clearly. The gift of choosing among many futures can, at its height, harden into the curse of being unable to choose at all. There is another peculiarity of prescience worth resting upon as sleep draws near. Those who possess it can sometimes cloud the vision of others, and there are places and choices that the sight cannot pierce. A powerful seer may look ahead and find regions of darkness in the branching land of the future, moments hidden from view, decisions whose outcomes cannot be foreseen. And where two prescient minds reach toward the same future, each may hide from the other, their visions tangling until neither can see clearly. So even this greatest of powers has its limits and its blind spots, its shadows within the light, and no seer, however deep their sight, ever holds the whole of time in a single certain grasp. All of this the great powers of the empire understood, at least in part, and all of it drew them toward the spice with a hunger that went far beyond wealth or long life. For prescience, more than any other gift of the melange, is the power that shapes history from behind the veil. The guild guards its narrow sight jealously, for upon it rests all travel between the worlds. The Bene Gesserit have bent their whole long purpose toward the mastery of it, breeding across the generations toward a mind that could see further and truer than any before. And the melange stands at the root of all of it, the one substance in all the known universe that can open the human mind to time itself. Without the spice, the futures stay hidden. With it, in the rarest of minds, the veil grows thin, and the branching roads of what is to come shimmer faintly into view. It is worth remembering, as well, how different this deepest gift is from the simpler ideas the empire holds about the spice. To the merchant, it is wealth. To the noble, it is long life and status. To the careless, it is only a pleasant shimmer upon the senses. But prescience shows the melange for what it truly is at its furthest reach. Not a comfort and not a luxury, but a power that touches the very fabric of time and choice. Those who have tasted it know that the spice was never merely a fine seasoning for the tables of the rich. It is a doorway into places the human mind was never meant to stand. And once a person has looked through that doorway into the branching country of the future, nothing about the world can ever seem quite so solid or so certain again. So let us hold this wonder gently as we sink toward rest. Somewhere in the empire, a navigator drifts in orange mist, peering just far enough ahead to bring a ship safely home. Somewhere, a reverend mother senses the faint shape of things not yet arrived and weighs it in her patient mind. And beneath all their seeing lies the desert and its worms and its shimmering dust, the source of every glimpse of the future that any of them will ever have. Prescience is the spice drawn to its most astonishing power. The doorway opened not merely into the mind or the memory, but into the flow of time, and it is, like everything the melange gives, a gift and a danger woven into a single strand that none who take it can ever fully unwind. Up next in Chapter 13, Paul Atreides and the Spice, we will meet the young man in whom all these threads at last come together, whose extraordinary reaction to the melange opens in him a prescience vaster and more terrible than any the universe has known, and whose life the spice will change beyond all measure. Of all the countless people who have breathed the spice across the long history of the Imperium, none was changed by it so deeply or so strangely as a young man named Paul Atreides. Tonight we sit with him for a while, gently, and watch how the melange found in him something it had never quite found in anyone before. He was the son of Duke Leto Atreides and of a Bene Gesserit woman named Jessica, and this simple fact of his birth mattered more than any crown or title, for it meant that in his blood ran two great streams at once. From his father came the discipline and the honor of a noble house. From his mother came the long, secret training of the sisterhood, and something older still, a pattern the Bene Gesserit had been weaving through their bloodlines for 90 generations. When such a young man came to Arrakis, the planet of spice, the two streams met the melange, and the meeting was like a spark falling into dry grass. At first, the spice touched Paul the way it touched everyone who came to that desert world. It was in the food he ate and the air he breathed. It tinted the corners of his sight and moved quietly through his blood. But where an ordinary person felt only a faint lifting of the senses, Paul felt the walls of his mind begin to open. He had been trained since childhood in the ways of stillness and attention, taught to watch his own thoughts as one might watch a candle flame, and so he noticed things that others would have missed. He noticed that the spice was showing him more than the present moment. It was showing him time itself, spread out before him like a landscape seen from a great height. This was prescience, the power we spoke of before, the ability to see across the folds of what is yet to come. In the Guild Navigators, it was a narrow and careful sight, enough to steer a ship between the stars. In the deepest Reverend Mothers, it reached backward into ancestral memory. But in Paul, the spice opened something vaster and more terrible than either. He began to see not one future, but many, thousands upon thousands of branching paths, each one a possible tomorrow, each one shifting as choices were made. He saw the futures fan out before him like the countless grains of the desert, and he saw himself standing at the center of them, a still point around which all those possible worlds turned. It is important to understand that the spice did not simply hand him this gift. The melange was the key, but the lock had been prepared long before his birth. For the Bene Gesserit had bred toward a certain kind of mind across their long and patient program, seeking one who could bridge space and time, one whose inner sight could reach where no other could go. Paul carried that heritage, and when the spice saturated him, the two came together and woke a power that had been sleeping in the pattern of his blood. The melange found the doorway already built inside him, and it flung that doorway wide. The awakening did not come all at once, and it did not come gently. As Paul went deeper into the desert, and deeper into the spice that soaked every part of that world, his visions grew stronger and stranger. He would look at a person and see the many ways their life might unfold. He would look at a moment and feel the weight of all the moments chained to it, stretching away in every direction. Sometimes the futures were so vivid that he could scarcely tell which one he was living, and the present and the possible blurred together like dunes seen through shimmering heat. This was not the pleasant dreaminess that spice gave to ordinary users. It was a flood, a vast and rushing awareness that threatened to sweep his sense of himself away. And within that flood, he saw something that frightened him more than any single danger. He saw that many of the paths before him led toward a great and terrible upheaval, a tide of fervor and war that might sweep out from the desert and across the stars, carried in his name. He saw that his own rise, if it came, might unleash forces he could not fully hold. The spice showed him this not as a warning he could easily heed, but as a shape woven into the fabric of the futures themselves, present down so many of the branching paths that he could scarcely find a way around it. To see so far was not to be free. It was to carry a burden that few human minds were ever meant to bear. Yet the spice did more than show Paul the shape of time. It changed what he was. As the melange worked deeper into him, it sharpened every sense and quickened every thought. His awareness of his own body grew so fine that he could feel the smallest shifts within it. His memory grew vast and clear. The training of the Bene Gesserit, which taught the control of muscle and nerve and breath, found in the spice a new depth, and Paul became something the sisterhood had watched for across all those long generations. He was becoming the one they called the Kwisatz Haderach, a name we will come to in its own time, the being whose mind could go where theirs could not. But that transformation was still unfolding, and it would demand of him a further and more dangerous passage before it was complete. For now it is enough to see how central the spice had become to everything Paul was becoming. Without the melange, his heritage would have remained a sleeping possibility, a pattern with no power to wake it. Without his heritage, the spice would have given him only the ordinary gifts it gave to any who lived on Arrakis. It was the meeting of the two, the ancient breeding and the strange substance of the sand, that made him what he was. The desert planet and the young nobleman were bound together now, and the melange was the thread that bound them. He could no more be separated from the spice than the spice could be separated from the worms that made it. There is something tender in the quiet of the night, in the picture of this young man carrying so much. He had not asked to see the futures. He had not asked to feel the weight of so many possible worlds pressing upon a single choice. The spice gave him sight beyond the reach of kings and sisterhoods, and with that sight came a loneliness that no crown could ease. For he alone among the living could see how narrow the safe paths were, and how much depended on the smallest turning. The melange had lifted him high above the ordinary river of time, and from that height the view was both wondrous and heavy beyond telling. And so we leave Paul Atreides here, at the threshold of his transformation, saturated in the spice that had opened in him a vast and terrible prescience, standing at the still center of 1,000 turning futures. He is not yet all that he will become, and the desert has more to teach him and to demand of him before his story is done. But already we can see the truth that runs beneath his whole tale, which is that the spice was never merely a substance he consumed. It was the doorway through which he passed into something greater and stranger than an ordinary man, and there was no path back through it once he had gone. Let that image settle softly over you now, the young man beneath the desert stars, seeing far and carrying much, held up by the same glittering dust that holds up the whole of the Imperium. Up next, in Chapter 14, The Economics of the Imperium, we will step back from a single life and look at the great machinery of power and see how this one substance, born of one desert world, came to hold a knife over every throne among the stars. Let us draw back now from any single person and let the picture grow wide and slow until we can see the whole shape of the Imperium spread out among the stars. It is a vast thing, this empire, older than any living memory, holding 1,000,000 worlds beneath a single throne. And tonight, we ask a simple question about it. The kind of question that seems small at first, and then opens into something enormous. Who truly holds the power in such an empire? Not the one who wears the brightest crown, as we shall see, but the one who controls a certain glittering dust born of a single desert. For the whole great machine of the Imperium turns, quietly and completely, upon the spice. To understand why, we must remember how this empire is held together. It is a civilization scattered across unimaginable distances, worlds so far apart that light itself would take lifetimes to pass between them. What binds them into one realm is travel, the ability to move ships and soldiers and grain and messages from star to star. And that travel belongs to the Spacing Guild alone. The Guild folds space and carries the traffic of 1,000,000 worlds, and the Guild, as we have already learned, cannot fold space without the melange. Its navigators live in spice, breathe spice, see through spice. Take away the melange, and the great ships go still. The worlds drift apart into silence. The empire, without ever being conquered, simply falls quiet and dies. So here is the first thread of the great knot. Whoever controls the spice controls travel. And whoever controls travel controls the empire. Because an empire that cannot move is no empire at all, only a scattering of lonely worlds that can no longer speak to one another. The melange is not merely a luxury traded among the wealthy. It is the blood in the veins of the whole civilization, and the one who can open or close that flow holds the life of the Imperium in his hand. But the Guild is only the first of those who cannot do without the spice. The Bene Gesserit sisterhood needs it too, for their reverend mothers cannot be made without the melange, and their long designs would wither without it. The great noble houses need it, for the spice lengthens life, and among the powerful there is always hunger for more years. The rich crave it for the vitality it gives and the ease it brings to the mind. Even the humblest people of 1,000 worlds have grown used to its faint presence in their lives. The whole society, from the throne to the meanest dwelling, leans upon this single substance, and there is nowhere to turn if it should fail, for the melange comes from one place only in all the known universe, and cannot be made anywhere else. Now let us set beside this need a second truth, which is the strange arithmetic of the spice trade. Because the melange exists on only one world, and because everyone must have it, its value climbs beyond all ordinary measure. There is no other market like it, for there is only one source and no substitute. A single load of spice carried away from the desert is worth more than the treasuries of whole planets. The wealth that flows from Arrakis is so great that it can raise a minor house to greatness, or, if it should be cut off, ruin a mighty one. To hold the spice trade is to hold a river of riches that never runs dry, so long as the sands keep yielding their gift. And because there is only one source, the price can never truly fall, for scarcity itself becomes a kind of law. Fixed and unbending is the desert that gives the spice its life. No clever merchant can undercut it, and no rival world can flood the market, for no rival world exists. The seller of spice sits alone at the head of every table, and all the great powers must come to that one table if they wish to buy. And so we come to the great and delicate balance at the heart of the Imperium, the arrangement by which its powers keep one another in check. There is the Emperor upon his throne, with his terrible legions. There is the Landsraad, the assembly of the great noble houses, jealous of their rights and watchful of one another. There is the Guild, which holds the monopoly of travel, and there is the Sisterhood, weaving in the shadows. Each of these powers is mighty, and each fears the others, and none can rule alone. What holds them in their uneasy peace is that they all depend upon the same thing. They all need the spice, and none of them can afford to see another seize it wholly. The melange is the axis around which all their power turns, and the fear of losing it keeps every hand half open and half closed. This is why the granting of Arrakis, the world where the spice is harvested, is never a simple gift. To place a noble house in charge of the spice harvest is to hand it a fortune and a danger in the same breath. The house that governs Arrakis grows rich beyond dreaming, but it also draws upon itself the envy of every rival and the wary eye of the throne itself. For a house that controls the spice, if it grew too strong or too independent, might come to hold the whole Imperium hostage, and no emperor could sleep easily beside such a power. So the harvest is given and taken, shifted from house to house, balanced always against the fear that any one hand might close too tightly upon the flow. Consider what it would mean if a single power did close that hand. Imagine one who could truly command the spice, who could say whether it would flow or cease. Such a one would not need to conquer the empire with armies, for the empire would already lie at his mercy. He would hold a knife, unseen but ever present, at the throat of every other power. The Guild would have to heed him, for without the spice its navigators go blind. The Sisterhood would have to bargain with him, for without the spice their order fails. The Emperor himself, for all his legions, would find his empire dissolving into silence if the flow were stopped. To control the melange is to hold a threat so total that it needs never be spoken aloud, for everyone already knows the shape of it. This is the quiet, iron logic that runs beneath the whole glittering surface of the Imperium. On the surface, there are titles and ceremonies, great houses and ancient laws, the pomp of a civilization that spans the stars. But beneath all of it, lies the plain and simple fact of the spice, and the plainer fact that it comes from one place and cannot be replaced. Every treaty and every marriage and every war among the great powers is shaped, in the end, by the need to keep the melange flowing and to keep any single rival from seizing it whole. The empire dresses itself in splendor, but its true foundation is a desert and the dust that desert gives. There is something almost peaceful in seeing it laid out so plainly, here in the hush of the night. All the striving of kings and houses, all the intrigue and ambition comes down at last to a substance that must keep moving from the sand to the stars. The powerful are not so free as they seem, for they are bound as tightly as anyone to the flow of the spice. They cannot stop needing it any more than a person can stop needing breath. And that shared and inescapable need is what holds their whole vast order together, and holds it, always, one failed harvest away from ruin. Let that understanding rest gently upon you now. The whole machinery of an empire turning slowly upon a single glittering thread. The crowns and the fleets and the ancient houses all lean, without quite admitting it, upon the dust of one lonely world. Up next in Chapter 15, why Arrakis is the center of everything. We will go down to that world itself, the harsh and worthless desert that somehow rules the stars, and sit for a while with the strange paradox of a wasteland that holds the fate of all. Come down with me now, slowly and softly, out of the great web of the empire and onto the surface of one single world. It is a small world by the reckoning of the stars, and a poor one, and if you were to judge it by any ordinary measure, you would call it worthless. Its name is Arrakis, though the people who love it best call it Dune, and tonight we sit with the strange and beautiful paradox that it holds. For this harsh and nearly worthless desert is, by the only measure that truly matters, the most important planet in all the known universe. Every throne among the stars leans toward it. Over its dry sands, more blood has been spilled than over any garden world, and understanding why is like turning a stone in the hand until it catches the light. Let us first be honest about what Arrakis is, in itself, apart from the spice. It is a desert from pole to pole. There are no oceans upon it, no rivers, no lakes, scarcely any open water at all. The days are furnaces, and the nights are bitter cold. Great storms rise upon it, storms so vast and so violent that they can strip the flesh from bone and scour the paint from metal, winds that race across the open sand faster than any vehicle can flee. Water is so precious there that it is counted drop by drop, hoarded and guarded and never wasted. To the people of the soft and green worlds, Arrakis is a nightmare, a place where the land itself seems to wish the living dead. By every ordinary reckoning, then, this world should be forgotten. It grows almost nothing. It shelters almost no one gladly. It offers no gentle harbors and no rich fields and no pleasant cities beneath kind skies. If the spice did not exist, Arrakis would be one of those countless empty worlds that no great power would ever trouble to visit, a barren stone spinning at the edge of the maps, of no more concern to the Imperium than a grain of sand is to a marching army. Here is the first half of the paradox, that by its own nature, the planet is among the least desirable places a person could ever be sent. And yet, upon this one world, and upon no other in all the vastness of the known universe, the spice is born. We have followed already the strange cycle by which it comes to be. The little makers and the sand trout, the great worms and the deep desert, the slow working of ages beneath the burning sands. All of that happens here and nowhere else. The very harshness that makes Arrakis so cruel to human life is bound up with the making of the melange. For the worms and the dryness and the endless dunes are all part of the one great process that yields the spice. The desert does not merely happen to contain the melange. The desert is the melange, in a sense, the whole living machinery that produces the most precious substance there is. So the two truths sit side by side, and their meeting is the paradox at the heart of our tale. Here is a world worth nothing by any common measure, and here is the same world holding the single thing without which the whole civilization cannot stand. The wasteland rules the stars. The place that can barely keep a person alive holds the fate of 1,000,000 living worlds. And once you truly see this, the whole strange history of Arrakis begins to make a terrible kind of sense, for you understand at last why the powerful have never been able to leave it alone. Think of what this means for those who govern the empire. Every emperor, every great house, every hidden order knows that this one desert is the source of everything they depend upon. The spice that lets the guild fold space comes from here. The spice that makes the reverend mothers comes from here. The spice that lengthens the lives of the mighty and fills the treasuries of the rich comes from here, from these same burning sands and nowhere else. There is no second Arrakis waiting in reserve, no other desert that might serve if this one failed. All the eggs of the whole civilization lie in this single fragile basket, and everyone who holds power knows it. This is why so much blood has soaked into these dry sands. To possess Arrakis is to possess the spice, and to possess the spice is to hold that unseen knife over every rival we spoke of before. And so, the great powers scheme and struggle over this one poor world as they would never struggle over 1,000 richer ones. Houses rise and fall for the sake of it. Armies cross the stars to fight upon its dunes. Fortunes are staked and lives are spent, all for a desert that no one would want at all if not for the treasure hidden in its cruelty. The paradox turns the ordinary logic of value upside down, for here, the harshest and emptiest world becomes the most fought over, precisely because of what its harshness makes. Consider how strange this would seem to a traveler who did not know the secret of the spice. Such a one, looking down upon Arrakis from the deck of a passing ship, would see only a dun and lifeless ball, wrapped in dust storms, without a single green field to catch the eye. He would wonder why the great fleets gathered above so plain a world, and why the banners of proud houses flew over so mean a prize. He would not understand until he learned of the melange, and then the whole meaning of the place would turn over in his mind, and the barren stone would become the most coveted ground in creation. There is a further turn to the paradox, and it is worth resting on gently. The value of Arrakis is not only that it holds something rare, it is that it holds something that cannot be taken elsewhere. The spice cannot be grown on a kinder world. It cannot be manufactured in some safe and pleasant laboratory far from the storms. It is bound to this desert, to its worms and its sands and its slow, deep processes, and it will not be moved. Those who crave the melange cannot bring its making home with them. They must come to Arrakis, into the heat and the danger and the killing storms, and they must take the spice from the desert on the desert's own hard terms. The wasteland does not surrender its treasure easily, and it never surrenders the source of that treasure at all. And so the people who learn to live upon Arrakis, who make their peace with its cruelty and learn its hidden ways, come to hold a strange and quiet power. To master the desert is, in a sense, to hold a hand upon the spice itself, closer than any emperor 1,000 light years away upon his soft green throne. But that is a thread we will follow another night. For now, it is enough to sit with the wonder of it, that a world so poor should be so precious, that a wasteland should rule the stars, that the least hospitable ground in all the known universe should be the ground upon which the whole future of the civilization is written. There is a gentle lesson folded into this paradox, the kind that settles well in the quiet of the night. Worth is not always what it seems. The bright and easy places are not always the ones that matter most, and the hard and forbidding ones may hold, hidden in their very hardship, the thing that everything else depends upon. Arrakis teaches this without ever meaning to. A barren desert that turns out to be the beating center of an empire. Its emptiness and its treasure bound together so tightly that neither can be had without the other. Let that quiet wonder settle over you now, the picture of one small desert world spinning far out among countless stars, poor beyond measure and precious beyond price, holding in its burning sands the fate of all the rest. Up next in Chapter 16, The Price of Addiction, we will turn from the world to those who take its gift and sit gently with the darker truth folded inside the spice, the chain that waits, hidden inside the doorway. We have spoken so far of the spice mostly as a gift. It lengthens life. It opens the mind. It folds the distances between the stars and lifts the fate of an empire upon its glittering dust. But tonight, we must sit gently with the other side of that gift, the shadow that lies always beneath the light. For the melange asks a terrible price of those who take it deeply, and that price is a chain hidden inside the doorway. The spice does not merely offer its wonders and then let a person walk away. Once it has entered deeply enough, it will not let go, and the one who took it can no longer choose to be free. Let us come to this slowly, the way the truth itself comes to those who live upon Arrakis. At first, the spice seems only to give. In small amounts, taken now and then, it lifts the senses and eases the mind, and there seems to be no cost at all. But the melange is patient, and it works its way into the body over time, threading itself into the deep processes of the flesh until it is no longer a visitor, but a part of the person. We spoke before of how the body of a spice user slowly comes to depend upon it, how the substance pervades the food and the air of Arrakis and seeps into every corner of the living form. That dependence, gentle at first, grows into something absolute. For here is the hard heart of it. Once a person has taken the spice deeply enough, for long enough, the body remakes itself around the melange. It comes to need the spice the way it needs water or air, not as a comfort, but as a condition of life itself. And then, if the spice is taken away, the person cannot simply return to how they were before. The withdrawal is not a passing discomfort that fades with time. For one who is deeply saturated, to be cut off from the melange is to die. The very thing that lengthened life becomes, in its absence, a sentence of death. This is the price, total and inescapable, folded into the gift. There is a cruel neatness to this arrangement if one steps back to see it whole. The spice gives its greatest gifts to those who take it most deeply, the long years and the opened mind, and, in the rarest cases, sight across time. But those very ones who have gained the most are also the ones most tightly held, for the depth of the gift and the depth of the bondage rise together as two sides of a single measure. The more the spice has given a person, the less that person can ever live without it. Think of what a strange bargain this is. The spice offers years beyond the natural span, vitality and clarity, and, for some, powers beyond the ordinary reach of the mind. But it takes in exchange the freedom ever to do without it. The one who accepts the gift accepts, in the same breath, a lifelong bondage to the source of that gift. There is no half measure once the saturation runs deep enough. The doorway that opened onto such wonders becomes a door that will not open the other way, and the person who walked through it cannot walk back out. This is why the spice is so much more than a simple pleasure, and why it holds such power over those who take it. A person can turn away from an ordinary comfort, can decide one day that they have had enough and let it go. But the deeply spice-bound person has no such choice. Their need is written now into the flesh itself. They must have the melange, not because they wish it, but because their body will fail without it. And so their dependence becomes a kind of quiet mastery over them, a chain all the stronger for being invisible, a chain that does not clank or bind the wrist, but sits deep in the blood. Consider then how this deepens everything we have already understood about the power of the spice. We saw how the whole imperium leans upon the melange, how the guild and the sisterhood and the great houses all need it and cannot do without it. Now we see that this need is not merely a matter of habit or convenience. For those most deeply given over to the spice, it is a matter of survival. The navigators floating in their tanks, so saturated that they are scarcely human anymore, could not be parted from the spice and live. The heaviest users among the powerful have bound their very lives to the flow. The empire does not merely prefer the spice. In its deepest servants, it cannot live without it, and that is a bondage no crown can break. There is a sorrow in this, and it is worth feeling gently in the quiet of the night. The spice gives so much, and yet what it gives is never truly free. Every gift it offers comes wrapped around a hook, and the deeper the gift, the deeper the hook is set. The long life it grants is a life that must be fed endlessly, with more of the same substance, or it collapses. The expanded mind it offers is a mind that has grown around the melange and cannot easily be untangled from it. The one who took the spice for its wonders finds, in time, that the wonders came with a keeper, and that the keeper never sleeps. And yet we must be careful not to paint this only in darkness. For the people of Arrakis, the Fremen, who live closest to the spice of all, do not see it merely as a chain. To them, the melange is woven into the whole of life, sacred and ordinary at once, the substance of their rituals and their sight and their daily bread. They have made their peace with the dependence, if peace is the word, for they have never known a life apart from it. For them, there was never a door to walk back out of, for they were born within the desert and within the spice, and the melange is simply the condition of their existence, as natural to them as the sand. The bondage that would terrify an outsider is, to them, only the shape of the world. Still, the deeper truth remains, whether it is feared or accepted. The spice is a doorway, yes, but it is also a chain, and the two cannot be separated. This is what makes it so unlike an ordinary drug, and yet, in this one respect, so like the darkest of them. For the mark of the deepest dependence is exactly this, that a substance ceases to be something a person uses and becomes something a person cannot live without. The melange carries that mark to its furthest extreme, offering more than any ordinary substance could, and demanding, in return, a more total surrender than any ordinary substance could exact. So when we ask what the spice truly is, we must hold both of its faces at once. It is the giver of long life and open minds and folded space, the lifeblood of a civilization. And it is the setter of chains, the substance that, once deeply taken, holds a person for as long as they shall live. On pain of death, should the flow ever cease. The doorway and the chain are one and the same. To pass through is to be bound, and the wonders on the far side are real, and so is the price. This is the shadow folded into the light, the dark truth resting quietly at the center of the gift. Let that understanding settle softly over you now, without fear, the way all these truths are meant to settle in the hush before sleep. The spice gives, and the spice keeps, and those who take it deeply live ever after within its hold. It is a heavy thing to know, and yet there is a strange calm in seeing it whole, in understanding at last that the greatest of gifts and the tightest of chains can be the very same glittering dust. Up next in Chapter 17, Spice and the Kwisatz Haderach, we will follow the melange to its furthest reach of all, and sit with the being the sisterhood bred for across the long generations, the one whose mind the spice might unlock to see all paths through time at once. Of all the powers the spice could unlock, there was one the Bene Gesserit sisterhood dreamed of above every other. A power so vast and so distant that they gave it a name older than their own order and spoke of it only in the quietest of ways. They called this awaited being the Kwisatz Haderach, a phrase that in one of the ancient tongues meant something close to the shortening of the way. The one who could be in many places at once, the mind that could stand at the center of all things and see them whole. For thousands of years, the sisterhood had turned this dream over in their patient hands, and for thousands of years, the spice had lain quietly at the heart of the dream, the single key without which the door could never open. To understand why, it helps to remember what the Bene Gesserit already were. Their reverend mothers, awakened by the bitter transformation of the water of life, could reach back into a long inner corridor of memory, touching the lives and the awareness of the women who had come before them, generation after generation, stretching away into the deeps of the past. It was a staggering inheritance, an entire ancestral chorus carried within a single living mind. Yet it had one strict and unbending limit. A reverend mother could look back along the line of mothers, but there was a place inside her she could not go, a dark region she could not enter, a threshold from which even the strongest of them turned away in fear. It was the male side of that inner world, the ancestral memory that ran through fathers rather than mothers, and it lay behind a veil no sister had ever been able to lift. The Kwisatz Haderach was to be the one who could lift it. He would be a male Bene Gesserit, a man whose mind could hold everything the sisters held, and then pass through the very threshold that turned them back. Where a reverend mother saw only her mothers, he would see all of it, the whole ancestry, both the female line and the male, the entire human past gathered into one unbroken vision. And because the past and the future are not so separate as they seem, the sisters believed that a mind able to see across the whole of what had been would also be able to see across what might yet be. He would not merely remember. He would perceive time itself as a single landscape, all its valleys and branching paths laid open beneath him at once. Such a mind could not be summoned by wish alone. It had to be grown, slowly, through the patient shaping of bloodlines across the centuries. This was the great secret labor of the sisterhood, the breeding program they guided with unhurried care, drawing certain families together and holding others apart, tracing the delicate arithmetic of inheritance down through the generations of the noble houses. They were not in a hurry, for they thought in spans of time that dwarfed the lives of emperors. Daughter was matched to house, and the daughter of that union to another, each pairing chosen to gather and concentrate the rare and scattered gifts that a Kwisatz Haderach would need, until at last, they believed, a child would be born in whom all the threads had come together. They kept their long records in careful secret, tracing each lineage back through the generations, and they placed their own trained sisters into the great families as wives and mothers, so that the threads would run where they wished them to run. It was slow and quiet work, invisible to the powers of the day, asking a patience no ordinary ambition could hold. The sisters gave their whole lives to a design whose completion none of them expected to see, content to be one small link in a chain that stretched far beyond any single lifetime. But breeding alone could only prepare the vessel. It could shape a mind of extraordinary potential, a mind poised at the very edge of the great transformation, and still the door would remain shut. What opened it, what had always been meant to open it, was the spice. The melange was the catalyst, the flood that would carry such a mind across the final threshold. A lesser dose deepened awareness and softened the boundary of time by a little. But the deep spice trance, the plunge into the water of life that transformed a woman into a reverend mother, was the crucible in which the greater transformation might also take place. If only the one who entered it had been shaped to endure what waited on the other side. For that was the danger folded inside the dream. The threshold the sisters feared was not fearful by accident. The place a reverend mother could not go was a place that could unmake a mind, a vision so total and so overwhelming that to look upon it unprepared was to be lost within it. Many had wondered, in the long quiet of the sisterhood, whether the Kwisatz Haderach, when he came, would be a blessing or a terror, whether a being who could see all paths through time would still be able to walk gently among ordinary people, or whether such sight would burn away everything soft and human within him. To hold the whole of time in one's awareness is to carry a weight no single person was ever meant to bear, and the spice was the very thing that would lay that weight upon him. There was, too, a deeper reason the sisters longed for him, quieter than ambition and older than pride. The universe they lived in was vast and blind, ruled by chance and by the schemes of powerful houses, and even the Bene Gesserit, with all their subtlety, could see only a little way ahead. Their own prescience, when the spice granted it, came in glimpses and fragments, brief openings that closed again like ripples on dark water. They dreamed of a mind that would not merely glimpse, but truly see, that could stand above the tangled currents of history and read them plainly, and so guide the whole of humankind away from ruin and toward some safer shore. It was, in its way, a tender hope hidden inside a cold design, the wish of a very old order to give the human race a pair of eyes that could finally see where it was going. And through all of it, patient and silent, ran the spice. Without the melange, the finest bloodline in the universe would produce only a gifted and troubled man, his potential locked forever behind a door he could not find. With it, and with the right heritage, and the courage or the recklessness to drink the deepest draught, that same man might cross over into something the galaxy had never known. The sisterhood understood this perfectly. It was why they watched over Arrakis with such care, why the flow of spice mattered to them as much as it mattered to any merchant, prince, or emperor, though for reasons no ledger could hold. The melange was not only life and travel and wealth to the Bene Gesserit, it was the last and most necessary ingredient in a work of 10,000 years, the substance that alone could turn a carefully grown child into the shortening of the way. So the dream waited, as it had waited for so long, held in the memory of the reverend mothers and written into the marriages of the great houses, needing only two things to become real. It needed a mind shaped across the generations to hold what no mind had held before. And it needed the spice, the strange dust of a single desert world, to fling open the final door. The sisters did not yet know, in their long patience, how near the awaited one had come, nor how far outside their careful design he would step when at last he arrived. They knew only that when the Kwisatz Haderach was born and drank deep of the melange, the whole shape of the universe would change, and that the spice, quiet and glittering and older than their order, would be the key that turned in the lock. Up next in Chapter 18, The Quiet Weapon of the Fremen, we will see how the desert people understood the spice far better than the powers who craved it, and how their knowledge and their great sandworms became a threat that could bring the entire Imperium to its knees. Far from the marble halls, where emperors and great houses schemed over the spice. Out on the open sand, where the wind never truly rested, lived a people who understood the melange better than any of the powers who craved it. They were the Fremen, the desert folk of Arrakis, and to the eyes of the wider empire they seemed poor and few and hardly worth counting, ragged wanderers scratching a life from the most unforgiving world in all the known stars. Yet it was the Fremen, and not the merchant princes or the sisterhood or the emperor himself, who held in their weathered hands the one secret that could unmake the entire order of the universe. The outsiders looked at Arrakis and saw only a source, a mine to be worked, a well from which the precious dust could be drawn. They flew in their harvesters and their carryalls, tore the spice from the sand in great roaring machines, and fled again into the sky before the desert could take its price. To them the melange was a commodity, a number in a ledger, a thing to be gathered and shipped and sold. They did not love it, and they did not know it. They knew only how to take it. The Fremen knew it differently. They had lived within the spice for uncounted generations, breathing it in the air, tasting it in every mouthful of food and water, wearing its stain in the deep blue of their eyes. To them, it was not a commodity, but a presence, woven through their bodies and their rituals and their oldest beliefs. They knew where it gathered and how it formed. They knew the moods of the deep desert and the slow rhythms of the sand. And above all, they knew the great sandworms, the makers, the vast and ancient creatures from which the spice ultimately came, and with which no outsider had ever learned to live in peace. This was the heart of the Fremen's secret, and it grew out of patient watching rather than any machine or weapon. The worms and the spice were bound together in a single unbroken cycle, the one giving rise to the other across the long ages of the desert. Where the sandworms lived and moved, there the spice was made. And the sandworms were not merely a danger to be avoided. They were guardians, drawn up out of the deep sand by any steady rhythm upon the surface, rising in fury to defend the desert that was theirs. The outsiders feared them as one fears a storm or an avalanche, a blind force to be fled. The Fremen had done something no one else had dared to imagine. They had learned to ride them, to call a maker from the depths, to mount its vast ringed flank as it surged through the sand, to steer it across the open desert and let it carry them where no machine could safely go. This was the great skill of the Fremen, passed from elder to child as a sacred art. It made the deep desert theirs alone, a country closed to every outside power, and it bound them to the worms as partners in the long life of the sand. The very creatures that made the wider empire tremble were, to the desert people, both their steeds and their kin, terrible and holy at once. Out of this deep knowledge grew a power the great houses never suspected, quiet as the desert night and just as vast. For if the Fremen understood the cycle of worm and spice better than anyone alive, then they also understood how fragile that cycle truly was. The melange did not simply appear. It was born of a delicate and particular process, tied to the water and the sand, and above all, to the makers themselves. And what depends upon so narrow a thread can also be broken. Somewhere in the long meditations of the desert, a terrible and simple truth had taken shape among them. The spice could be destroyed. Not merely a harvest lost, but the whole source poisoned at its root, the cycle itself brought to an end forever. It was a threat unlike any other in the universe, because it could not be answered by fleets or armies or the wealth of 100 worlds. Whoever ruled the empire ruled it only so long as the spice flowed. Without the melange, the guild could not fold space, and without folded space, the stars fell apart into isolated islands, each world cut off from every other, the emperor a prisoner on his own throne, the great houses stranded and blind. The entire structure of the Imperium rested upon a single substance, and that substance came from a single world, and the secret of that world belonged to the Fremen. To hold the power to end the spice was to hold a knife not against one enemy, but against the throat of civilization itself. This is what made the desert people so quietly formidable, though few outside the sand ever understood it in time. They did not need to defeat the Empire in open battle. They needed only to be believed when they said that they could destroy the very thing the Empire could not live without. A people who could unmake the spice could bring emperor and house and guild alike to their knees, not by force of arms, but by the mere and credible promise of ending the flow forever. It was the weapon of those who owned nothing the powerful valued, and yet held the one thing without which nothing the powerful owned had any worth at all. There was a strange justice in it, and a kind of quiet poetry too. The powers of the universe had looked at Arrakis and seen a wasteland dotted with a few troublesome natives, beneath their notice, useful only for the treasure buried in its sands. They had never thought to wonder whether the people of the desert might understand that treasure more deeply than they did. They had never imagined that true mastery of the spice lay not in the harvesters and the ledgers, but in the patient, humble knowledge of those who had made the desert their home and the worms their companions. The Fremen had been underestimated for so long that their strength had grown in the shadows, unnoticed, until it was very great indeed. And so, the quiet weapon waited, held in reserve, spoken of rarely and never lightly. The Fremen were not a cruel people, and the thought of ending the spice was to them a thing of last resort, an unthinkable act to be threatened only when all else had failed. For the spice was woven into their own lives more deeply than into anyone else's, part of their bodies and their prayers and their vision of what the desert might one day become. To end it would be to wound themselves as surely as it wounded the Empire, and they knew this well. That was what made the threat so grave. It was not the empty boast of people with nothing to lose, but the solemn word of those who would sacrifice even the thing they held most sacred, rather than remain forever in chains. Yet the threat was real, and in time it would be understood by the one who came to lead them, a man who saw with terrible clarity what such a promise could do. In his hands, the desert people's knowledge would become the lever that moved the whole empire, the still point around which the fate of the stars would turn. For the truth the Fremen had always known was simple and absolute. Those who can destroy a thing utterly hold real power over it, greater by far than those who merely wish to possess it. The great houses guarded fleets and fortunes. The Fremen guarded a secret and a worm and a threat, and it was more than a match for all of it. Beneath their poverty and their patience lay a power that could silence the empire with a word, and they carried it as quietly as they carried water across the sand, spilling nothing, wasting nothing, waiting for the hour when the desert would speak. Up next in Chapter 19, What the Spice Truly Is, we will draw all our threads together at last and answer the question that began our long night, discovering what the melange really is beneath all its names. And so we come, at last, to the question that opened our long night, the question folded into the very name of our telling. If the spice is not really a drug, then what, in the end, is it truly? We have wandered far to reach this quiet place, across the sands of Arrakis, and through the bodies of those the melange has changed, into the tanks of the navigators and the memories of the reverend mothers, along the ledgers of the empire and the meditations of the desert people. Now let us gather all those threads together and hold them, gently, in a single hand. The first and simplest answer, the one the outside world clings to, is that the spice is a drug, and it is true that it behaves like one in certain ways. It enters the body and will not leave. It alters what a person feels and sees. It creates a dependence so complete that to be parted from it is to die. By this narrow measure, the melange might seem to belong among the intoxicants and the medicines, another substance that changes the mind and binds the body. But to stop there is to mistake a doorway for the room beyond it, to name a thing by its smallest quality and miss the whole of what it is. For the spice is not made in a laboratory, nor grown in a quiet field. It is born of the desert itself, of the slow turning of a cycle older than any human record, in which the great sandworms and the sand and the hidden waters of Arrakis conspire across the ages to produce something that exists nowhere else in all creation. It is, in a sense, the living breath of a single world, the essence of one planet distilled into a glittering dust. No other world offers it. No art can make it. It is as particular and as rooted as a spring that rises in only one valley, and yet upon that one strange substance, the whole vast civilization of the stars has come to depend. Think, then, of everything it holds within it. The spice is time itself, for it lengthens the lives of those who take it, granting decades and sometimes centuries beyond a natural span, so that the years of an ordinary person stretch and deepen under its influence. The spice is distance, for without it the guild could never fold space, and the worlds of the empire would drift apart into lonely islands, each cut off from all the others by gulfs no ship could safely cross. The spice is sight, for in its deepest draughts the veil of time grows thin, and the mind may look forward into what is coming and backward into all that has been. The spice is memory, for it awakens in the Reverend Mothers the long chorus of their ancestors, an inheritance of lives reaching back into the deeps of the past. And the spice is transformation, for it was to be the key that opened the mind of the Kwisatz Haderach, the one who could see all paths at once. No single word can carry all of that. A drug changes the one who takes it and touches nothing else. But the spice reaches outward from the body into the very shape of the universe, deciding which ships may fly and which minds may waken, which houses may prosper, and which worlds may speak to one another across the dark. It is at once the smallest and the largest of things, a fine dust that settles on the tongue and a force that holds the stars in their arrangement. To swallow a drug is to change an evening. To command the spice is to change the fate of everything that lives beneath the imperial sun. It is why the wiser characters in the story never truly called it a drug, and why the Fremen, who knew it best, treated it as something close to sacred. The melange is a doorway, yes, opening onto powers and perceptions that ordinary life keeps closed. But it is also a chain, binding whoever passes through that doorway so that they can never again step back. It is a gift and a price in the same breath. A widening of the mind that cannot be undone, and a dependence that cannot be escaped. To take the spice deeply is to be enlarged and imprisoned at once, and the two are so tightly woven together that no one has ever found a way to have the one without the other. And it is more even than doorway and chain. It is lifeblood. Consider how the whole body of the Imperium moves upon it, the way blood moves through a living creature. The guild folds space on spice, and so the ships fly. The Bene Gesserit deepen their powers on spice, and so the sisterhood endures. The emperor holds his throne only because the spice flows, and the great houses keep their fortunes only so long as it keeps flowing. Every part of that immense and ancient civilization, from the humblest world to the highest court, is nourished by the same slow current rising out of a single desert. Cut off that current, and the whole vast body would grow cold and still. The spice is not one commodity among many. It is the very circulation of an entire way of life, the substance in whose absence everything else falls silent. Here, then, is the answer our long night has been carrying toward. The spice is neither simple drug nor mere treasure, though it wears the face of both. It is the strange living heart of a whole civilization, doorway and chain and lifeblood all at once, a single substance in which time and distance and sight and memory and power are somehow gathered together. It is the one point on which everything turns, small enough to hold in a cupped hand, vast enough to decide the fate of the stars. And it is alive in the truest sense, for it comes from living creatures and sustains living beings, and cannot be manufactured or replaced, only found, only harvested, only guarded and craved, and fought over on the endless sands of Arrakis. There is a deep strangeness in this, and a deep truth about the world of Dune itself. For that world imagines a future in which humankind has spread across thousands of planets and mastered wonders beyond counting, and yet remains utterly dependent, in the end, upon the dust of a single desert. All the power and pride of the Empire rests upon a substance no emperor made and no engineer can copy, a gift wrung from the hostile sand by the labor and the blood of countless workers. It is a humbling thought, folded quietly into a story of thrones and prophecies. The mightiest civilization the tale can imagine is held together by something it neither created nor fully understood, and could lose at any moment. That is what the spice truly is. Not the thing the merchants believed, nor the thing the addicts feared, but something larger and stranger than either. The melange in which a whole universe found its life and its chains at once. To understand it is to understand the world of Dune entirely, for the spice is that world in miniature, beautiful and terrible, generous and cruel, indispensable and impossible to master. It is the doorway through which every great power passed, the lifeblood in which they all swam, and the chain that bound them each to the same small desert world beneath the same enormous sky. And so, having asked what the spice truly is, we have our answer, gentle and complete. It is the living heart of everything, the quiet center around which all the rest revolves. There is nothing more to solve tonight, and nothing more you need to hold. Let the answer settle over you as softly as dust settling on the sand after the wind has passed. Up next in Chapter 20, The Spice Must Flow, we will rest at last upon the old truth that echoes through the whole of the saga, and let it carry us, gently, all the way down towards sleep. There is a phrase that echoes through the whole of the saga of Dune, spoken by emperors and merchants, by navigators and desert folk, by the powerful and the humble alike, until it becomes something like the heartbeat of the entire story. The spice must flow. 4 small words, plain and unhurried, and yet within them lies the whole of what we have spent this long and gentle night exploring. Tonight, as we come to rest, let us hold those words softly, and let them carry us the last little way down towards sleep. The spice must flow. Say it slowly, and hear how much it holds. It is the law beneath all the other laws of the Imperium, the one rule that every power, however great, must bend to obey. Emperors rise and fall, houses war and make peace. Fortunes are won and lost across 1,000 worlds, and through all of it the same quiet necessity remains. The melange must keep moving out of the desert and into the veins of the Empire, or everything stops. It is not a wish or a slogan, but a simple truth about how that whole vast civilization stays alive, as basic and as constant as the need of a living body for breath. We have seen, over these long chapters, just how much rests upon that flow. We began with the spice as the single most valuable substance in the universe, found on only one world, desired by every power. We followed it to the sands of Arrakis, the harsh and beautiful desert called Dune, and into the great cycle of the sandworms who make it across the slow turning of the ages. We learned that it is not really a drug, but a doorway, and we saw what it does to the human body, the way it works itself into food and air and blood, and the deep blue of the eyes it leaves behind. We saw the long life it grants and the dependence that is its price. We followed the spice out among the stars into the folded space of the Spacing Guild and the strange remade forms of the navigators, floating in their tanks of orange gas, steering ships through distances no ordinary mind could cross. We entered the quiet order of the Bene Gesserit and watched the melange deepen their powers and awaken their reverend mothers through the bitter transformation of the water of life. We touched the gift and the danger of prescience, the sight that reaches across time, and we saw how it opened in Paul Atreides a vision vast and terrible. We counted the cost of it all, the total addiction, the chain hidden inside the gift, and we traced the economics of an empire balanced upon a single desert. We learned why that wasteland rules the stars, and how the Fremen, who understood the spice best of all, held in their patient hands the power to end its flow forever. And at the last, we asked what the spice truly is, and found that it is no one simple thing, but the living heart of a whole civilization, doorway and chain and lifeblood, all at once. Now, gathering all of that together, we return to those 4 quiet words and understand them fully. The spice must flow, because upon its flowing rests the travel between worlds, the endurance of the sisterhood, the wealth of the houses, the throne of the emperor, and the fragile unity of the stars themselves. To keep it flowing is to keep the whole great body of the empire alive. To halt it, even for a moment, is to threaten everything. It is worth pausing in these last quiet moments on how strange and how fitting it is that a whole saga should turn upon a single phrase like this. The spice must flow. There is no boast in it and no cruelty, only a plain acknowledgement of how things are. The most powerful people in the universe do not command the spice so much as they serve it, arranging their whole lives around the need to keep it moving. The emperor on his throne and the smuggler in the deep desert and the sister in her quiet chapter house are all, in the end, bound to the same simple necessity, brought level by their shared dependence upon a substance none of them can make. In this way, the spice is a great humbler of the proud, reminding even the mightiest that they rest upon something far older and stranger than themselves. There is something restful in a truth so large and so settled. It asks nothing of us tonight. Through all the long history of the Imperium, through the rise and fall of houses and the schemes of the powerful, this one truth held steady, as constant as the turning of the sands. Whatever else changed, the spice kept flowing, and the empire kept breathing, and the great slow cycle of the desert went on giving as it had always given. The spice has flowed out of the desert for longer than any of the characters in the story can remember, and it will go on flowing after them, drawn up from the sand by the same slow cycle of worm and water and wind that made it in the beginning. Empires may quarrel over who controls that flow, but the flow itself is older and calmer than all their quarreling, a deep current running quietly beneath the noise of thrones. Let your thoughts drift out over the great dunes of Arrakis now, silvered under an enormous desert sky, and feel how small and far away all that striving becomes. Picture the desert at night, when the harvesters have gone and the heat of the day has lifted away into the darkness. The sand lies cool and still, ridged into long soft waves that run to the horizon in every direction. The 2 moons of Arrakis hang low and pale above the dunes, and their gentle light turns the whole desert to soft silver, so that the ridges and the hollows seem to glow faintly of their own accord. A little wind moves across the surface, lifting a thin veil of dust and letting it fall again. patient and unhurried, smoothing the sand as it goes. Somewhere far below, a great maker moves through the deep sand, slow and ancient and untroubled, and where it passes the spice is quietly made, as it has been made for ages beyond counting. Nothing rushes here. The night is wide and calm, and the desert keeps its long, unbroken peace beneath the wheeling stars. There is no hurry in any of it. The stars wheel overhead in their enormous patience, and the dust glimmers faintly in the starlight, and the whole desert breathes in its long, slow rhythm, giving and giving without end. That is the image to carry down with you into sleep. Not the wars or the schemes, not the emperors or the fear, but the desert itself, and the spice rising from it as gently as mist, and the old truth resting over everything like a soft blanket of sand. The spice must flow, and so it does, quietly, endlessly, asking nothing of you at all. You do not need to guard it, or understand it, or hold on to any of it. You may simply let it be, and let yourself be, here in the warm dark, where nothing is required and nothing is broken. Let your breathing slow now, like the long rhythm of the dunes. Let each thought you have gathered tonight settle softly and grow faint, sinking away like dust drifting down through still air, until only calm remains. The spice flows on without you, as it always has, and there is nothing left for you to do but rest. Let the desert hold the whole of it now, the empires and the worms, the long ages and the quiet sands, so that you may set it all down and be at ease. You are safe. You are whole. The desert is quiet, the worms move slow and deep, and the great current of the melange runs on beneath the stars, steady and unhurried, carrying the whole sleeping universe softly through the night. Good night. And so we come, softly, to the end of our telling. Tonight we followed the spice from its place at the center of the universe, to the sands of Arrakis where it is born, and into the strange life cycle of the great sandworms that make it. We learned that it is not really a drug, but a doorway, and we saw what it does to the human body, the blue within blue eyes, and the long life it grants at the price of dependence. We followed the spacing guild and its folded space, the navigators remade in their tanks, the Bene Gesserit and their reverend mothers, the water of life, and the gift of prescience. We saw Paul Atreides transformed, the economics of the Imperium, why Arrakis rules the stars, the chain of addiction, the Kwisatz Haderach, and the quiet weapon of the Fremen. And we came, at the last, to what the spice truly is, and to the old truth that the spice must flow. There is nothing left now that you must remember. Let each of those distant and difficult things sink away from you, down through still dark water, growing fainter and fainter until only calm remains. You are safe. You are whole. Nothing here is broken, and nothing asks anything of you. Let your breathing slow, and let the last of the day dissolve like mist over a quiet desert at dawn. Good night. If this story carried you toward rest, stay with us. There are many more long, gentle tales waiting for the nights to come.